for Yellowstone National Park and the Acoustic Atlas at Montana State University. This is telemetry. You know, every season in Yellowstone is pretty fantastic, but if you're into listening to the sounds of animals, spring and summer, well, there's just nothing like it. And while most creatures in Yellowstone are busily singing their hearts out this time of year, there's one animal that actually gets a little quieter in the spring and summer. And that's the wolf. You see, there's a seasonal cycle to wolf howling. Howling ramps up through the fall and it peaks in late winter. Then comes springtime.
Howling abruptly drops off, and this is caused by the female choosing a place to den that they really want to keep secret, if at all possible.
That's Kira Cassidy, research associate with the Yellowstone Wolf Project.
Choosing a den site is extremely important for a wolf pack. It's going to be their hub for the entire summer. It's the house of the entire next generation. And it has to be protected, of course, because the tiny, helpless pups are going to be there for several months. We've had cases where a pack has attacked another wolf's den and even killed the pups in some cases. They don't really want to let other packs know where they are and what they're doing. And in order to avoid that, they keep quiet.
Now, it's not only the frequency of howling that changes throughout the year, but the type of howling shifts too.
Wolves howl for a couple of different reasons. Some of that would be within the pack, so to keep track of each other, say if they've been separated.
And even though they're doing a lot less of it, this is the kind of howling that tends to dominate in the spring and summer, wolves communicating with their own pack mates.
They also howl to let other packs know where they are and to kind of establish a territory.
Wolves will often have these howling bouts with other packs. The two packs will howl back and forth as if to say, this is our turf, our territory. And it's that howling for territoriality that grows in the months leading up to the winter breeding season.
Howling really tracks the hormones. As the wolves are getting ready for the breeding season, testosterone will start to spike. Howling starts to increase. It's kind of a stressful time in some ways. They do a lot of howling during the breeding season. They also probably use howling as a way to advertise the number of wolves they have in the pack, the type of wolves they have in the pack. If they have a lot of big male fighters, that's going to come across in a howling bout with another pack. And in some ways, wolves may be able to use it to avoid a fight with another pack too. They can kind of create that space between each other, let each other know where they are, but also let them know who they are.
Kira's specialty is looking at territoriality in wolves and interpack aggression, basically when two packs come into contact with each other and fight. Sometimes wolves will fight until one pack or one animal displaces the other, and sometimes they'll fight to the death.
This running into other packs is so vastly important to a wolf pack. It's, of all the wolves that live in Yellowstone that we've radio collared, some of them disperse outside of Yellowstone, of course. But if they live their whole life in Yellowstone, 2/3 of them end up being killed by other wolves.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. I'm Ashton Hooker.
And I'm Brett Rayburn.
Hey, Brett.
Hey, Ashton. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome.
Good.
It's getting close to lunch, so my stomach might rumble a little bit here. But
mine is seriously rumbling as well. Can't hear it.
Yeah, I
in
have
the
this big
microphone.
lunchbox behind me. I'll try not to rummage in it too much. So we'll see.
Well, today we have Addie Falgu, who is a park guide here in Yellowstone. We're going to talk to her a little bit more about her job and what it's like. And so as a park guide, you know, if you're a visitor to Yellowstone, you might see them out and about either in the visitor center, roaming park trails, park guided walks and talks, things like that. And so along those same lines, we have the Junior Ranger program, and it's pretty popular.
Yes,
you
I've
can get
heard
it
of
in
it.
a bunch of different parks, Yellowstone as well. So my question for you, do you happen to know how many Junior Ranger badges are awarded here in Yellowstone every year?
Every year.
Every year.
Number of Junior Ranger badges. So not just people who like get the books and don't
Correct.
go through to graduate. I'm going to say, I'm trying to see if Miles will give me any hints here because he orders the badges. I think it's like, I'm going to say 160,000.
Ooh, wow, that's more than I thought you were going to guess.
Yeah,
But really,
like way
you're
off.
not too far off. So in the past couple years, you know, we've had a few weird years with COVID and the flood and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's been a little lower the past few years, but it's been about 50,000.
Okay. I'm like, so come on, Junior Rangers, step up.
Yeah. But on
this
a
year is
normal-
going to be the year where we give out
normal year, it's like
160,000.
50 to 100,000. So you're not too far
I mean,
off.
that is a lot of Junior Rangers being sworn in.
It's a lot more than I thought.
That's a lot of oath takers.
Yeah.
We're in good hands.
Yes, we are. All the Junior Rangers out there. So anyway, we're going to talk with Addie more about what she does in the park. So Addie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. So ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how did you get your start with the National Park Service?
So I got my start in 2017 as an intern in Glacier Bay National Park.
And that's in Alaska.
That's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It often gets mistaken for Glacier in Montana. So often I do specify Glacier Bay in Alaska.
I heard the emphasis on Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And so what drew you to that? Did you always know you wanted to be a park ranger?
So growing up, my family traveled to national parks. I think a lot of people in this career. And I kind of, was really interested. I fell in love with the Tetons and I was like, well, I want to live there one day. And the way to live there is to become a park ranger. So simple enough. I'll just do that. And it got a little bit more complicated than that. But in high school and college, I started to look more seriously into pursuing a career in that direction. I actually visited Yellowstone in college and spoke to some rangers on that trip and asked them, hey, how do I get into this field if I'm interested? And they gave me some good information on internship programs like the SCA and also how to find jobs on USA Jobs.
What is the SCA, just for those who don't know?
Yeah, so the SCA is the Student Conservation Association, and the internship that I did in Glacier Bay was through them.
Okay. And so what exactly did you do?
Yeah, so the position there was an education intern, and Glacier Bay has pretty little visitors that actually set foot on the land there. And the number of visitors in the winter is pretty much non-existent. And so most of the visitation is in the summer on cruise ships. So in the winter, they have a pretty robust distance learning program. So we were actually using Zoom before COVID and before Zoom really became a thing, and essentially taking students on virtual whale watching tours and field trips to the park.
Wow.
That sounds like a good gig.
Yeah.
So you're on a boat, like while you're doing this?
No, so we were in an office with a green screen that
pretending
made it
you were on a
look like we
boat.
were on a boat. I
Did
did
you
get to
shake
go
the
out.
camera and
Yeah.
rock it?
I did get to go out with the oceanography team though, which was really fun one day, and we got to take water samples. So I did get to have that experience in the bay, but most of the time was spent in the office.
Okay. So did you go from Glacier Bay and then Yellowstone, or were there other stops in between?
There were a few steps in
Yeah.
between. Yeah, so after Glacier Bay, I did a couple of seasonal positions as an interpretive park ranger and also an education position in Grand Teton National Park. And then I was pretty fortunate to get offered a permanent job pretty early on in my career, and that was in Hot Springs, Arkansas. That was also a park guide position. I was there for a few months and then took a lateral reassignment to a park guide position here, and I've been here since. It's been about 4.5 years, I think.
Okay. Wow. And so tell us a little bit about being in Yellowstone. A lot of people don't know that there are actually park rangers that live on the interior of the park. So what that means is, like, not at any of the park entrances. And so Yellowstone closes down in the winter. So you're at Lake Village,
Yep,
out
that's
down by
correct.
Yellowstone Lake. So tell us what that is like. Like, how did you even get here this morning? Walk us through what that is like.
Yeah. So essentially, we kind of get snowed in the winter, and often things are complicated, but there's a lot of snowmobiling to your car and then transitioning to take your car to a location. Currently, we have less snow this year, which you think would make traveling easier, but it's actually made things more complicated because my car is at one location, but there's not enough snow for me to snowmobile from the roads that have enough snow on them to my car. So I have to take like an in-between car to get to my car. So to get to the studio this morning, I took a snowmobile and a couple of vehicles.
Wow.
So, and it took about 2 hours, whereas normally if I could just snowmobile straight here, it would have been probably 30 minutes faster than that. So
Wow.
That is
That's some
dedication to the
complicated
show.
steps.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, but those of us in the interior look for excuses to get out. So I was very happy to be out here today.
Wow. Well, we're glad you're joining us, and you took the long trek to come all the way up here.
What's your typical, like, how often do you get out to get groceries and things like that?
So it really varies depending on the year. Typically, I try to stockpile groceries in the fall so that I never need to go out specifically for a grocery trip. But if I happen to be out for another reason, then I always get groceries. But I'd say usually in a normal year, I'd probably leave twice a month each winter. So every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
And so I've seen some park rangers who live in the interior in winter. They do a lot of canning.
mhm.
Are you into that?
No,
at all?
I am
No?
the unhealthy ranger that lives off of pasta
Ramen.
and frozen pizza. Yeah. So,
Yes.
Hey,
yeah.
it's delicious.
I don't do any canning, but if you just eat a lot of pasta, dried goods, that stays really well. So I can
Mhm.
really stock up in the fall.
Wow. And so in a typical winter, so one that we're
Mhm.
not having now with not as much snow, you would normally just snowmobile everywhere,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
just snowmobile to my vehicle at whatever entrance it's located at. And typically it's not a big deal. I actually really enjoy snowmobiling most of the time. And there's incredible opportunities to see wildlife along the way. Amazing scenery. The sunrises and sunsets in the winter are always really special. So although it has its challenges, overall, I really like living at Lake. There's incredible opportunities for skiing around the neighborhood. But it's not to say it doesn't come without its challenges.
For sure. So in your current position as park guide, do you have a typical day? Can you tell us a little bit what that's like? I know it probably varies from day to day, but
Yeah, I'd say I have a typical summer day and a typical winter day.
okay.
Would you like to know about both of those or just
Sure,
one of
yeah.
the seasons? Okay. So in the summer, a typical day, a third of it is usually spent working the visitor center front desk, answering questions, helping people plan their trips, answering questions about what birds they're seeing, animals they're seeing. Like the number of questions we get, you never know what's going to come out of someone's mouth. So it can be all over the place. Another third of the day is typically spent leading a ranger guided program. So that can be a talk, a campfire program, a walk. And the remaining third of the day is typically spent out in the field roving. And so talking to visitors on boardwalks in some of the thermal areas, interacting with people at wildlife jams, making sure no one's petting bison at wildlife jams.
Very important.
Yeah. So that's kind of a typical summer day. In the winter, my job is kind of unique in that I staff a building called a warming hut. And so, most people are kind of putting out figurative fires in their day-to-day work. And my job is literally to go and start a fire. So I go to the warming hut, start a fire. And the purpose of that is to serve as a place for snowmobile groups to stop in and warm up. That's the sole source of heat for the building. So depending on the day, if it's really cold out, it could be 10 degrees inside when I get there.
Oh,
It could take a few hours to get up to temperature, but we try to get it about 60 degrees in the building and interact with groups as they stop by throughout the day. The Fishing Bridge Warming Hut is a quieter location. So on average, we've got about 20 to 40 people that stop per day. And in between groups, surprisingly, cell service is actually really good at that location. So I'm able to plug into a mobile hotspot and respond to visitor trip planning emails. I've helped with social media at times as well. And so I can stay connected and do other work in between groups. So it's more kind of office and admin work mixed in with splitting firewood.
Wow.
That's a
Yeah.
good combination.
Quite a variety of skills
Yes.
required. And so where do you live? Like, what are your living accommodations like? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering.
That's the number one question I get asked at the warming hut. And what I usually tell those visitors that are asking is that we have housing at each of the developed locations in the park. So my housing area is only a couple miles away. So it's just a couple miles snowmobile ride to the warming hut. Often groups get there and they're like, how did you get here? And I'm like, well, I snowmobiled here just like you. But like, I had the easy commute. Like they're snowmobiling 26 miles to get to me. I only did 2. So
You're like, I just crawled out of the lake.
Out of the lake. Which you probably could because it's not frozen.
Yeah, I did a training once in the park where I spent the night in a snow trench. And sometimes I do consider telling people that. I'm like, where do you live? Where do you sleep at night? I'm like, just in a trench in the snow over there.
I've been here a few years, so they moved me to the 3-bedroom snow trench. Yeah. They take care of us here.
So what's the most important skill you'd say for your job?
The most important skill in my position is probably communication.
Mm-hmm.
So as an interpretive position, it's really important to communicate these messages and try to foster a connection between the people that are visiting Yellowstone and the resources that we have here in the park. And so being able to tailor messages for specific audiences is really important in order to communicate that effectively and try to hopefully inspire the next generation of stewards for these lands.
Yeah.
What's one of the hardest or most memorable questions that you've had asked?
Ooh, that's a good one. So this is a funny one, but the most memorable question, there was a girl, she was probably about 12 years old and she was really shy. I was at Mud Volcano and I could tell she was kind of embarrassed to ask this question. Her mom's like, she has a question. And I was like, sure. And she's like, I don't know if I want to ask. And I was like, no, go for it. No judgment. And her question was, how do bison poop in such perfect circles? And I loved it because so often we get the same questions.
That's a scientist question,
over
right?
and over again. And so that I'd never gotten that one before and I've never gotten that one since. And so, I took a moment and I was like, well, it has to do with the consistency in which the poop comes out. So it's kind of like pancake batter. Like if you put pancake batter in a frying pan, it spreads out into a circle. I'm like, it doesn't come out that shape. And I think that helped her out. So I wonder if she thinks about that.
I'm not eating any pancakes that you bring to the office, but that's a great way of explaining it.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that every time I see some bison poop out there.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job is probably getting to re-experience the magic of Yellowstone through the eyes of first-time visitors. I've literally had kids jumping up and down for joy when they saw a grizzly bear for the first time.
No.
And I've seen adults cower when they hear a bison grunt during the rut. And those moments just remind me of how special this place is. They allow me to remember why I fell in love with this place and why it's worth protecting.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so on the other side of the coin of that, there's great parts of the job, maybe some that are not so great or just a little tough. What's the toughest part of your job, you'd say?
I think the toughest part of my job is probably dealing with angry and frustrated visitors. People are coming here on vacation and everything's supposed to go right for them. And when it doesn't go right and they're on vacation, they really want someone to blame and someone to give them answers for that. And being a frontline staff member, we're kind of the face for the park. So we're often the person that receives the brunt of that anger and aggression. And especially in the middle of the summer, if you're receiving that day after day, multiple times a day, and often these complaints are about things that we have little to no control over. Sometimes they're because of natural disasters like floods. It can be really hard to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes lots of patience.
Yes. Lots of patience. So even with those kind of tougher parts of the job, why do you still want to, work as a park guide or work for the Park Service? What is it that keeps bringing you back? Yeah.
Although there can be tough days and those negative people, I think the good days and the good people really outweigh it. You might have someone who's mad at you one moment and then you have a really special connection with a junior ranger the next. And it just reminds you kind of why we're doing this. also just having an opportunity to live here is something that I try not to take for granted. There's incredible recreational opportunities that I have right in my backyard. And I've also had incredible wildlife sightings literally from my couch. Like I've seen bears and coyotes. I think the only thing I haven't seen out of my back window is a wolf. But there's not a lot of places in the world where you have opportunities for recreation like you do in a national park, and opportunities for these really incredible wildlife sightings. And so I think those moments remind me of why I'm here, why I'm doing this. They're incredibly rewarding personally, but they also remind me of the importance of protecting that so that other people can experience that too.
Oh my gosh, like being at a lake in the winter when it's slower has got to be so quiet and peaceful. Like,
Yeah.
in those moments.
I mean, the other morning, actually, Sunday, I went to the warming hut and there were 4 wolves in the road. And that was I did my 2-mile snowmobile commute to work, got to my office, and I saw 4 wolves at my office. And I've seen foxes and coyotes passing in front of that building as well. And I was all alone. No one else was there. And so it's a really special moment when you have moments like that. And those moments always kind of take me back to why I'm here. And I find that some of my best moments in the park, best sunrises, sunsets, rainbows, wildlife sightings, have occurred on some of my most difficult days. And so it's like, even though there are those tough days, the park always finds a way to remind me of why I'm here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that reminds me of a time a few years ago. I was driving home. It was a Friday. It was the end of the workday. I was trying to get back to the office, and I got stuck in this Bison jam for 2 hours. So I didn't get home till like 8 p.m.
Yeah.
But it's moments like that, like a lot of those people are experiencing that for the first time. And it's super cool that you get to be in a place like that, where you get to have those types of experiences and sightings. So,
and when you're frustrated in that Bison jam, but you look over at like a little kid who's just glued to the window, can't believe what's happening, kind of makes it a little easier. Yeah, at least you're not stuck on an interstate somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. So do you have a defining moment? You've talked about some cool sightings and things that you get to experience living in the interior in winter. Is there like one moment that really stands out to you as like a career defining moment?
Yeah. I don't know if this is a defining moment, but when I thought about this, a moment that made me feel like I was really in the right place and doing a good job and something that I was really proud of happened a couple of summers ago. I had a father and daughter asking questions, and the father was the main one asking the questions, and the daughter was really curious and she started chiming in. And so she'd ask a question, I'd give her an answer. She'd ask another question. And so this really natural flow of conversation began. I even went and got a bear skull and brought it out to show her. And so I was sitting on the porch with this bear skull talking to her about it. And I remember she looked up at me and said, "Ranger Addie, I love learning with you." And it really just melted my heart because it felt like all of this was worth it. And I really was having an impact and inspiring the next generation of stewards for these lands. And after that, her father pulled me aside and was like, "I just want to tell you, like, I really appreciate that you took the time to speak with her and answer all her questions." He was like, "I know she had a lot of questions." And he's like, "I don't know if you know that the impact that had on her." And I didn't even realize this at the time or tell him, but I don't think they realized the impact that they also had on me, because that was just reminding me of why I'm here and why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one of the like interesting things about your job is it's less like quantifiable the impacts that you have. And so like, who knows what that little girl is going to grow up to be or do.
I know we're talking about Junior Ranger badges in the intro, and after I answered all of those questions for her, I was like, "Well, you're working on a Junior Ranger book, right?" She said no, she'd never heard of the program. And so I got her a book, and she was like, "I want you to be the ranger to swear me in. Like, when are you working again?" And so I was
awesome.
like, "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. is the 1 hour that I'm here."
My personal park
I was
ranger.
like, "You got a deadline for this? Because then I'm going to be on my weekend. I'm going to be backpacking." And she was like, "I'm finishing it." And so she came back. I think she was only 6, but she did all of her work that day and came back the next morning, and I got to swear her in. So, maybe
cool.
she'll be in this position in the future, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe she'll be a real ranger one day.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And that's a lasting impact too.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So we'll get into the nitty gritty of your job. the park guide position that you're in, do you know what the series is on USA Jobs? So if people want to go apply, what should they look for?
Yeah, the series is 0090.
And do you know, are those like entry-level jobs? How far up the ladder can they go with those?
Yeah, so park guide positions are typically more entry level, and mine is a GS5 position.
And do you need any formal training or anything like that?
There's no formal training needed for this position. Just having experience in education and interpretation is helpful.
Okay. So if you were to give somebody advice on like what type of experience they should get, what would you tell them?
My recommendation would be just get experience where you can, whether that's like volunteering at your local environmental center, which is something that I did, or working at a nearby state park. If you can get experience in interpretation and environmental education, that's going to be a really good way to get your foot in the door.
And how did you, I mean, obviously you have to know a lot about the resource to answer all those questions about circular bison poop and stuff. So how, I mean, is that just stuff that you research kind of on the job or on your own just because you're curious? How do you get that knowledge?
I'd say a combination of both. I had visited here, I don't know how many times before working here, probably 5 times with my family. And so from that, I just had a lot of basic knowledge of what are the popular sites to see and how do you be a visitor here, because I had visited. So I kind of had some of that background knowledge. I had some knowledge on the ecosystem that I learned when working in Grand Teton National Park. Some of that was on the job learning. Some of that was reading before I did that position. And then since I've been here, I'd say more of the knowledge that I've acquired has been on the job, either reading different references, learning from fellow rangers is probably one of the biggest ways that I learn, and just answering questions. It's really scary as your first day being a ranger, working at the front desk, having to answer questions, but that's the only way that you're going to know what people are asking and know what information you need to know.
Yeah, I've worked the front desk a few times and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know.
But and then you're one of the main people that like is contributing to the resources that we're using.
Well, in Yellowstone, there's so much information to possibly know too. So
that's another thing that's like really kept me in Yellowstone for so long, is that it's hard to get bored here, because one day I'm getting questions about circular bison poop. The next day I'm getting questions from a microbiologist who knows more about the thermophiles in these features than I do. But yeah, there's just endless knowledge to know. And so, yeah, there's still questions that I get that I don't know the answer to. And I tell them I'll go look it up and get back to you. And sometimes it's hard to find an answer, but I try.
Well, that's really cool. And so the last thing we like to ask people, what is your favorite memory that you've had? It could be here in Yellowstone or any other national park, since it sounds like you've worked and visited lots of different national parks. Do you have a favorite moment that you've had?
So something that stands out to me is a moment I had here in Yellowstone, and it doesn't involve wildlife or hiking or thermal features like you might expect it to. It actually involves the ice on Yellowstone Lake, which I know some of you here have heard me go on and on about the ice on Yellowstone Lake. But Yellowstone Lake freezes in the winter, and living at lake, this is something that is a pretty exciting event to us. Like, what day is the ice going to freeze, or the lake going to freeze? What day is it going to melt? Sometimes it sings as well. So we kind of really like live our lives by the seasons of the lake. And Ice Off Day is like my favorite day of the year. I just think it's so incredible, and it doesn't happen every year. But if conditions are right, as the ice breaks up, it gets pushed out of the lake at Yellowstone River, which is the only outlet to the lake, and it flows down underneath Fishing Bridge. And as that happens, those chunks of ice all kind of get compressed into each other, and you can stand on Fishing Bridge and look underneath your feet, and it's just mesmerizing watching this like icy slushy move. It sounds really cool too. It's like a bunch of shards of glass almost. And usually it occurs late May, like Memorial Day weekend. And a couple years ago, I was actually out of the park on a temporary work assignment, and I wasn't scheduled to get back until June. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make it back in time for Ice Off. And I was pretty sad about it, because it only happens once a year. Like it's not like Old Faithful. It's not happening every 90 minutes. So I was really bummed that I was going to miss Ice Off Day. And I was moving back into the park on June 3rd. And as I'm driving along the lake, I see that the ice is still there and it's starting to break up. And I rushed to Fishing Bridge, got to Fishing Bridge in time. I'm standing there watching the ice, listening to the sounds, and I look up and there was a double rainbow. And
Whoa.
as silly,
Cool.
yeah. And as silly as
Perfect
it
moment.
sounds, it just felt like the lake had waited for me. And that was Yellowstone's way of welcoming me back home.
That's
Aw,
awesome.
That's really cool.
I would like Yellowstone to welcome me back home with a double rainbow next time I'm down there too. So if you could
I'll try.
make that happen, that would be so. And I have to go back to one other thing you said really fast before we go, because you said it sings.
Yeah. So as the ice cracks and forms, those sound waves are kind of sent through the ice, and you get these really unique sounds. It kind of sounds like lightsabers. It doesn't happen often. Conditions have to be just right, but it's really cool when it does occur.
Sorry, can you give us what does it sound like? Can you give us your best impression?
Yeah, it's like pew, pew, pew. But also there's other sounds too, but those are the coolest sounds.
That's cool.
I will be listening out for lightsabers next time I'm down there.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Addie.
Thanks for
that
having
was
me
awesome.
today. Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
was really fun.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of What We Do. Thanks again to our guest, Addie Falgout. If you like what we do, rate and review the show wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new listeners find the show. If you have questions or want to learn more about a particular job, contact us using the form at go.nps.gov/whatwedopodcast. Thanks for listening.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. I'm Miles Barger.
And I'm Ashton Hooker.
Hey, Ashton.
Hey, Miles.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Are you ready to record a fire podcast today?
Yes.
Straight fire?
Fire podcast
Straight
coming
fire?
your way.
Because today we're going to talk to John Cataldo, Yellowstone's Fire Management Officer. And before we get started, I have to do a little fire trivia. It's going to be a trite one, but I think it's still interesting. So Yellowstone, record fire, 1988. How many acres of the park burned
Ooh.
during those fires?
I know it was massive. I know it was a lot.
It was a lot.
I'm
You
going to
can
say...
round to the nearest 100,000 if you want.
Okay, I was going to say a few 100,000. I'll say 600,000 acres.
You're
Up.
little
I'm
higher.
getting the up motion.
a little more.
800,000?
That would be the right rounding.
Oh, nice. Wow.
793,880 is the official number I found.
Do you
but,
know, like, if we were to compare,
and that's
what's
in
that
Yellowstone.
size?
That's not the full fire.
like,
complex,
what's
correct?
like 800,000 acres compared to?
Gosh, that's a good question. Yellowstone's 2.2-ish million,
Okay.
which is what states combined? Rhode Island and
It's two
Rhode Islands.
and change.
So maybe 2/3 of a Rhode Island. It was 36% of the park. Pretty big.
That's a pretty big fire.
Yeah, pretty big. And that's just inside of Yellowstone. Anyway, there's our trivia. But today, like I said, we're talking to John Cataldo, Fire Management Officer. You ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
All right, good. So in your career, have you always worked for the National Park Service in your career? Or did you start with a different agency in terms of fire?
I started with the National Park Service in 1992,
Mm-hmm.
and I've kind of oscillated back and forth between the U.S. Forest Service
Mm-hmm.
and the National Park Service, but always a federal agency.
Okay.
Yep.
What was your first job in fire?
My first job in
Or in
fire, well, in general, it was actually part of my financial aid package when I was an undergrad at Humboldt State University.
Mm-hmm.
I was offered a work study opportunity as part of my financial aid. And I was studying wildlife management at Humboldt State University in Northern California. And my advisor and the department chair was married to the branch chief of wildlife at Redwood National Park. And I was on academic scholarship as well at Humboldt. And he kind of passed my name along to to his wife and said, we've got a potential work study student if interested in picking them up for some work. And they gave me a key to the office for Redwood National Park and a pile of wildlife observation cards that visitors and employees had filled out. And it was a pile pretty much up to the ceiling. And they gave me a key to the office and let me go in there 10 to 15 hours a week, all during the school year, and just at my own pace whenever I could fit it in between classes and whatnot. And that was kind of my very first Park Service job.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So how long after that was it when you first got into fire of some kind?
The very next summer, I was working up in Alaska for the Forest Service
Nice.
in Cordova, which is the last place I ever moved to without checking the Farmer's Almanac for like how much rain or sun it gets or doesn't get. And turns out that Cordova, Alaska gets 169 inches of rain a year. And I was working in fisheries at the time. So I studied wildlife and fisheries in college. And so that was how I got my start in the service, was those sorts of positions. And so working in fisheries, we were outside every day in Cordova, wearing rain gear. And honestly, after a couple months of that, I was basically pruning. Like it had just been like, you just had been in the shower for 2 months. And they said, hey, do you want to go to fire school? And I just said, is it indoors? And they were like, yeah, it's down here in the district office was an old courthouse of some kind. And it was like, yeah, fire school was in the judge's chambers or something in the courthouse. And it was in fact indoors. And I said, yeah, I'm your man. And so I took fire school, and of course, the place where it rains that much, you don't get a lot of fires. But it was an exceptionally dry summer there the next year when I returned, and we had a couple of like little fires out on the Copper River Delta, fireworks or something. And I got to go to those. And then the 1994 fire season in the lower 48, which is kind of another benchmark fire season, in the lower 48 at least, kicked off in August. And I spent the last 6 or 8 weeks deployed down here on fire crews. They kind of went to each little team on the district up in Alaska, and everyone had to volunteer somebody to go be a firefighter. And I was good at hiking and carrying a big pack and stuff. And they said, why don't you go? I said, let's go.
Well, so what did you said you were studying wildlife starting out.
Yeah.
Did you ever envision yourself being in fire? Like what were you kind of working toward before you got the offer of like, hey, you can come indoors and learn how to
like,
deal with fire.
Just working towards, a career as a wildlife biologist or a fisheries biologist. I studied both, and I grew up loving it and, loving the outdoors and whatnot. I'm a kid from suburban Long Island, New York, like 20 miles outside the city. And that was my big escape, was going to the woods. And, even if that was running around catching garter snakes under garbage on the side of some parkway on Long Island, which is honestly how you start in wildlife management.
Wow, beautiful,
if you're
yes.
a little suburban Long Island kid, there's not a lot of open wild spaces or places to get away from the crowds. The woods kind of became my retreat when I was young, and just got out the book of colleges, when you're in high school, and it's like the size of a phone book, and it's every college in the country and all the programs they offer, and picked 3 or 4 of the top wildlife management programs. And one of them happened to be 4 hours from where my brother lived in Oregon. And
nice.
Ended up at Humboldt.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So when you finally did get into fire, what was it that kept you there?
I've always been into, played a lot of sports growing up. So I like being really physical. And honestly, probably statistics and organic chemistry pushed me towards firefighting, because to kind of take the next step in wildlife and fisheries, it was going to be really heavy. And, you kind of get to that point in your education where it's like, I don't know if I'm ready to take the next step.
I think organic chemistry is that line for quite a few people.
Yeah.
It kind of weeds people out, huh?
Yeah. So just working on a team and being outside, and it was just a good fit.
Mhm.
It was like I was kind of made to do it. I just
Just felt
enjoyed
right.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just felt right. It was just right off the bat.
Mhm.
It was a good fit. I just fell right into it. And you're lucky if that happens to you.
Yes.
Whatever
I agree.
you are, whatever you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, how did I get to where I am today? And I feel lucky. I don't think I would have planned it. Like you're saying, sometimes these things just happen.
Yeah, I had some apprehension, in the beginning, and just talking to other folks who'd done it previously. And they're like, no, it's great. It's like camping for dollars. Like we're going to go camp for weeks, and we're going to work hard all day, and then we're going to go sleep in a tent, and we're going to get up and do it again. I was like, that sounds great.
So what was I'm guessing, I don't know yet, but I'm guessing a theme in these podcasts that will come up is the career progression can be interesting. So like, what are the steps to go from that, where you're like actively out camping, fighting fire,
Yeah.
to where someday you're spending most, if not all your time in an office and dealing with budgets and hiring in the big picture? Like, what did that look like for you timeline wise?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the hazards of the job is someday someone's going to hand you a radio to talk on.
Uh-oh.
That's the first hazard of the job, right? They kind of leave you alone for a few years because it's dangerous to let you be in charge of anything. And then at some point they're like, oh, like you seem pretty squared away. And they hand you a radio, and that's a big fork in the road. Is you're going to let me talk on the radio while I'm on a fire and actually, help coordinate what's going on. And I've held a lot of positions along the way. We get to go a lot of different places in this job, which is also what attracted me to it. I think I've been to fires in 18 different states.
Oh, wow.
At this point. And I'm not done yet.
Right.
I got a lot left in me, but
Was one of those states more memorable than the others? Does one stick out to you?
they are so unique. I know it sounds cliche, but I mean, literally I've spent 3 weeks camped 3 feet from the Yukon River in interior Alaska, helping manage a long duration fire up there, and I've done a lot of prescribed fire down in Big Cypress, down in South Florida. So literally this job has taken me from one corner of the country to the other. And a lot of places in between. And you just get to, granted, you're working really long hours while you're there, but you get to see a lot of interesting things, you're off the beaten path a lot.
Yeah.
So you just have a lot of shared experiences, and
Must be interesting too to get to like be pretty intimately familiar with so many different types of forest as well, and like the way fire behaves so differently in these different places. And
and you have to be a student of it because
I bet
it'll kill you if you're not paying attention. So you are very eager to learn when you go to a new place, like how does it move right through this stuff? Does it move by jumping from tree to tree, or is it mostly ground fire? Are there interesting local factors? Like, does it burn? Some places it burns really hot and downhill at night. Didn't see that coming, right? So you gotta make sure you're being a student and finding the people that understand how fire moves on that particular landscape. And, helps keep us all safe and meet the objective, whatever that is.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead to now.
Okay.
So do you have a typical day in your job?
A lot of what drew me to this is that it's not a lot of typical. I guess should focus on the summer, because like you mentioned, the winter, when you're in a year-round position and you live at 6,300 feet in a national park, we get a lot of opportunity for winter and typically don't have fires. And in the off season, it is a lot of just planning and for next season and hiring and communicating with our partners and cooperators and just kind of getting on the same page for the next season. But once we kind of throw the switch and the temporary employees come on in the spring and we kind of ramp up and just sort of get into the mode, so to speak. A typical day, we start off with a briefing with everyone on the team, and we get together for about 20 minutes and we go through a safety conversation and a weather conversation, situation, whatever's going on, fires in the park, fires around the park, fires we may find ourselves on later that day. Just whatever's going on, go through a plan for the day, and then we just sort of fledge everyone to their assignments. And typically we'll go 5 different directions on any given day, and we'll be engaged with fuels reduction projects, in some of the urban interface areas around the park. We'll be out monitoring the fuel moisture and different types of fuels that we're curious about in the park. That's a big part of the program, just being prepared for what might come, and how wet or dry the fuels are is a big part of that. So we'll be out doing that, maybe helping our neighbors with some incidents that they're managing. So they're just really, every day is different.
Yeah.
Especially once we get around to like May or so, and then through October, you just really never know what you're getting into.
Right.
So it's a good career field for someone who likes to keep moving and have surprises thrown at them.
There's a lot of moving.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts. You have to be
and
really,
you're out in the field a lot in the summer?
I get to pick and choose my spots at this point a lot. Unfortunately, the field part of my job has definitely dropped off, particularly here just because of connectivity issues.
Yeah.
Because we are so remote, relatively speaking, to a lot of other places in the lower 48 that because a lot of my day-to-day responsibility is to be what we call a duty officer. So I'm the first phone call on any new potential vegetation fire. So however that report comes in from a visitor or from an employee, it'll get routed to our dispatch center, and then they call me as the duty officer and say, here's what we might have. What do you want to do about it?
So you need to be reachable.
I need to be
times,
reachable
basically.
at all times.
Yeah.
And if people can't find me, I'm not doing my job. So it does kind of keep me around headquarters
Yeah.
a lot, but of course I do enjoy getting out on fires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your current job, what do you think is the most important skill?
For my position, I think the ability to triage a lot of emerging problems and to pretty quickly sift through what's important and what's noise and what can wait and what, you're pretty much when things are rocking and rolling, there's a constant state of just, your awareness is just peaked, and you're just constantly trying to update what we call a common operating picture of like, what is our fire environment, what's going on, and what the biggest threats are, right? It's all about risk management. I mean, fire management is risk management. So risk to people, first and foremost, risk to infrastructure, buildings, and then everything after that. So yeah, just the ability to maintain the correct flight altitude. And, all of us start out as just ground pounders, right? Swinging a 5-pound tool 10,000 times a day is how you first prove that you can do this.
Right.
And then you go from there to where you're virtually never swinging a 5-pound tool anymore.
Yeah.
So sometimes when really things start rocking and rolling, some folks will revert to what they're most comfortable with, right? Which is the first thing you ever learn. And they want to kind of get in the weeds. And just being able to maintain that 30,000 foot flight altitude as a fire management officer or a duty officer, that's pretty critical.
Well, and that skill to bring in all that different types of information and then be able to make decisions, that probably comes with a lot of experience that you've had over the years. So if you were to what advice, what types of experience should people be seeking out if they want to, get to your type of position one day?
Variety, just really seek variety, and particularly prescribed fires. So controlled burns, another way we describe those. Being involved with that is a great way to just see a lot of fire on the landscape and watch it, and not necessarily have to just be responding to it, to take those opportunities to see how it moves and understand the physics of it. Just really pays dividends down the line. So it's just experiential learning, all of it. I mean, there's a big on-the-job training component. We have a huge continuing education component to all of this, where as you progress along, we're sending you to more or less 1 week long classes. We have a lot of 32 to 40 hour classes we'll send you to, but those just sort of complement that field experience. So it's just go full send, like just get as much fire under your belt as you possibly can is the best way to be good at my job. And so that's why I oscillated between the two different agencies, because, you know, the Forest Service, that's the big green machine, right? So I think half the U.S. Forest Service budget is fire management.
Wow.
So they're highly invested in it. And that's where the majority of the resources in America are, you know, they're in the green trucks with the different logo. And so coming up in the Park Service was great, but I also realized I'm not seeing enough fire on Park Service land to get as good as I need to get at this to have the job I want to have someday. So I knew I wanted a job like I have now, but to get there, I had to leave the agency, you know, go to a different federal agency, and ended up running a hotshot crew for close to a decade, which is a great way to see a lot of fire.
Yeah.
So that was just all by design. That was like, well, I think I've done what I can. In the Park Service, there just wasn't as many opportunities to move up or move laterally. We just don't have as big a program. And it's like, I'm going to go fight fire with the Forest Service for about a decade, and then I'll come back and I'll feel a lot more confident what I'm doing.
So you did want to end up back at the Park Service?
Absolutely.
Ultimately?
Yeah.
Why that over, you know, like you said, Forest Service is the big agency that's handling all this stuff. What about the Park Service made you want to end up here?
I just love the mission, really. And I mean, it's the greatest, last, best places. Right? I mean, the Park Service units are, you know, particularly for me, loving the mountains. I mean, being in the Northern Rockies, it's just outrageous. And this region in particular, I've spent time in the Pacific West and the Pacific Northwest, and I love those systems as well. But I mean, the Rockies are just outrageous. So for me, you can't beat it. So
yeah. Was that kind of same sentiment what drew you to Yellowstone, or like was there some sort of draw to Yellowstone for you in particular?
You know, I'd spent about 5 years of my life in Alaska. So one of my early Park Service positions, actually my first permanent appointment, was I was the first helicopter manager hired at Denali. In the year 2000, we had the National Fire Plan came out. So we'd had kind of a succession of really intense fire seasons in America. And the result of that was a thing called the 2000 National Fire Plan. And a big part of that was a big injection of funding into fire management in America. So, you know, a lot of life's timing, right? And so when the National Fire Plan rolled around, I had about 9 seasons under my belt, either of fire management or wildlife or fisheries management. And I think three full seasons and a few qualifications under my belt. And then all these permanent jobs popped up. And I was sort of in a really good position to compete for one of them. So that was just good timing. And a lot of my peers, we call ourselves like National Fire Plan babies, because we all got our start. We all got our very first appointment sometime in the spring of 2000.
I mean, I think, a couple things you said I think are good for people to keep in mind in terms of thinking about wanting to work for federal agencies in general and the Park Service specifically, is like there is timing, there is luck, there is when these things come along, and also having the 30,000 foot view of your own career, like you were saying, is like, maybe I need to leave for a while to get these other experiences. Because I think sometimes people think I'll just be able to follow this exact path that I want and get the jobs I want. And I feel like that so rarely happens with anyone that I know in the Park Service, whether they leave for a completely different field sometimes or switch agencies or whatever. It's like, this is where I would like to be, but I need to get this experience here or this there, or thinking about the career ladders and the way things can go. Yeah, I think I'm glad that you brought up those points, because I think it's a good thing for people to remember. That's certainly how my career has been. I think almost everybody I talk to.
Yeah, I think a big part of it, I tell folks all the time, you know, to some extent, you have to be prepared to move at the speed of opportunity, you know, and you can't just expect to in the federal service and the Park Service, like plant roots in one spot and march up the ladder through your entire career in one place. It's just not realistic. Possible at a massive unit like we work at, right? Because we do have a tremendous organizational chart here and a lot of really deep programs and a lot of career ladder potential. That's pretty unique.
It is.
In the service, though.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, you can go to a lot of parks and there might be, the chief ranger and 2 seasonal law enforcement.
Yep.
At these smaller units, in that career. And obviously there, you're not going to try to stay in one place for 30 years and become the chief ranger. Like you might have to step to the side to step up and step back. But there's tremendous opportunity to move around. I think that's a great thing. I wanted to see a lot of places and I wanted to do a lot of different things. And for me, the emphasis in my life wasn't going to be plant roots, start a family young, be in one place, coach the volleyball team or something. Like I didn't want to do that. I wanted to just really move around a lot and just see a lot of things. And like I said, I'm a suburban Long Island kid. Yeah. Once I hit the West, I wasn't slowing down. I wasn't going to move out West and plant somewhere. So I've achieved that.
So with all these different experiences that you have, it might be hard to pick one, but is there like a moment in your career that stands out to you as really being a defining moment or even the defining moment? Was there some time where you're like, this is it for me, or was it more gradual?
In my fire service career, I'd say the day that we were certified as a hotshot crew in Northern California, that process took several years and was pretty intense. And so I'll remember that day for the rest of my life for sure.
Yeah.
Anytime you're working towards the same goal for 6 years, year round, it's a pretty big day when someone finally says you're good enough.
Wow.
But within my Park Service experience, really the entire 2016 fire season here in Yellowstone is kind of a benchmark too.
Yeah.
Any fire season you're a part of that ends up with like a commemorative pint glass or something is usually probably a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And in that year, we successfully managed 100 square miles of fire in Yellowstone while concurrently celebrating the centennial.
Oh, wow. Big year.
So there was a period of time where we had an incident management team just managing the centennial celebrations in Mammoth and Gardner, Montana. And we had a separate incident management team assigned to the Maple Fire, which was out by West Yellowstone, ultimately burned about 55,000 acres. And we had a third incident management team concurrently managing a basket of about 5 or 6 smaller fires, most of which were out on the northern range of the park. And we had all that going at once, and we didn't have any single serious injuries. Rotating firefighters through that for months on end, and didn't lose a single shingle off the side of a structure.
Wow.
So no one got hurt.
Amazing.
We didn't burn anything up that we didn't want burnt up or were willing to accept burning up. And, 100 square miles of a pretty incredible natural process in the world's first national park. So that year sticks out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just mentioned like protecting these historic, buildings that are in the park and stuff like that. And earlier you mentioned fuels reduction projects. For people who don't really know what that means. Like, how do you do that? How do you protect? Like, because there's all these historic buildings throughout the park. How do you go about protecting those?
It's really all about just creating what we call defensible space around those, and we really focus on the first 30 to 300 feet of vegetation immediately around that structure. So we just basically need some elbow room around there to function as firefighters. We can't have little baby trees growing out of the foundations of old buildings and pushing the shingles off the side of them and stuff like that. That'll happen in a place like Yellowstone. Lodgepole pine is a pretty robust species, and it's a little bit weedy in some places where it gets really thick and comes in pretty strong, especially after a fire. So when we're talking about fuels reduction, we're just literally in and around the developed areas in the park, just reducing the amount of biomass. So really focusing on the smaller brush and grasses and trees that are, say, under 4 to 6 inches in diameter, and just removing those and just basically thinning it out.
Okay.
In other areas, we might use prescribed fire or controlled burning to try to accomplish that same objective, because fire is a really efficient way to reduce the amount of biomass around a subdivision. But lodgepole pine, when it burns completely. So its natural fire regime is stand replacement. So it burns from the surface of the ground, of the tops of the trees, and completely is what we'd expect. And that's not really a great thing to have in and around a community, because you're just trading one problem for another. So you do a controlled burn, and then you have a patch of dead trees next to your homes, and then you're dealing with that. So we just prefer not to do controlled burning around our developed areas. And we just go in and just thin out the vegetation so that if a fire does come in there, it's not moving through the tops of the trees, which is, of course, where it's really intense and dangerous. It's going to stay on the ground where we can deal with it, and preferably on the ground with flame lengths less than 8 feet. That's kind of our cutoff. If the flames are taller than 8 feet, we're going to need a pretty heavy hand to deal with that. We can't swat that out.
Gotcha.
So for people interested in your field, your career field, what, before we get to your series and grade and all that kind of stuff, where would people look if they wanted to get started in fire? Like, what series would they look for?
We're actually going through a really big transition right now in how we're classified as firefighters. We were forestry technicians for the first few decades of this profession. And essentially, it's been decided over the past few years that's not a very accurate description of wildland firefighting for lots of good reasons. And so now there's a new wildland firefighter job series, and that's 0456. And it's designed to be a hire to retire job series. So we're going to be recruiting and advertising positions in that from now on, literally from the GS3 to the GS15 level.
Wow.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah. And previous to that, we were hiring entry-level positions as 0462 forestry technicians. And then I'm currently in an 0401, which is a biologist, ecologist job series. And that's all transitioning. So going forward, it'll be 0456 from GS3 to GS15.
Wow. So that simplifies it a lot for people interested in looking.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can focus in on that series and find something that aligns with whatever experience they have.
Yep.
And get in the door.
Yeah. And getting in the door is not that complicated. We don't have super high educational requirements, basically a high school diploma and a great attitude and an aptitude to learn new things. A commitment to physical fitness. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like we can start there.
Right.
And we're going to teach you the rest. So
it's pretty cool.
It's pretty
I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely noticed, like, I've never been in wildland fire or anything myself, but just being around people who are, there's definitely like a vibe, a culture, I think, of the people who stick with it. Because like you said, you gotta want to get into it.
Well, and you have a lot of intense shared experiences, right?
Yeah.
So anytime you do that, you do form a certain bond with the people that you're doing that with that you can't simulate elsewhere, except maybe like within your actual immediate family, like the experiences you might have with your brothers and sisters growing up. And there's, so many stories I can't tell anybody because they won't even understand.
Sure.
And that's a powerful thing. And it could be lonely at times because there's, you got to like find your old hotshot friends to like talk about, some fire and you're on, because you would just spend all your time trying to explain it to other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of a unique job in that regard. But you meet a lot of great people and it's not easy. It's not an easy job to do. Right. So if you're around people that are doing it and sticking with it and making it past, there's kind of this imaginary line at year 3 where you're sort of in or out, right? You're either like, this is what we're doing because the commitment level is so high, or maybe this isn't for me and I don't like sleeping on the ground and not being completely convinced like when the next meal is going to show up out here, or just being out in that environment.
Yeah.
So when you're around people that have made that commitment and made those sacrifices, it's a pretty special. So yeah. We have really good stories if you can get us to tell them.
Maybe someday.
About to say I could keep I wish we could talk for like 3 hours.
Yeah. And so along those lines, like if somebody's looking for this job in a national park, not every national park has these jobs, right? Or do they? I'm not familiar.
Not every unit. Certainly the larger mid-size to larger parks. So for example, in our region, we have 14 park level fire programs, and those programs either manage one or a group of parks. So, when you talk about a Yellowstone or Mesa Verde or Bandelier, Rocky Mountain, Dinosaur, Zion, all those units have a program, and pretty robust, So sometimes when you get into like a much smaller unit, like we manage fire for the Little Bighorn. So Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, about 4 hours east of where we're sitting. And we provide fire management services for them, but they don't have any firefighters per se, or any equipment. So it's just sort of an administrative responsibility. And so, we manage their fires through agreements and relationships. So the Crow Agency has agreed to come over, put out any fires if we get any out. But most mid-size national parks are going to have, especially out west, will have their own program. So
cool.
There's a ton of opportunity, investment. The bipartisan infrastructure law I call it National Fire Plan 2.0. It's essentially the next huge influx of investment in wildland firefighting in America. The Park Service is benefiting greatly from that. So all those programs are kind of on the uptick. It's a great time to get your foot in the door and start a career or advance in your career in fire.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I wish we could talk for like 3 hours. I want to just ask you about fire ecology and behavior and what it's like to like get to know it's just like a fascinating process to me. It's like a chemical reaction happening that has its own life and scale, and like you said, behaves so differently. But we do have to wrap it up. So do you have a favorite story or memory from your time in Yellowstone or another national park, but just something that
I've been reflecting on that recently, and I couldn't come up with the one thing. And maybe that's because at this point in my career, in my life, I've learned to appreciate like small things, And obviously we live in a place where we're just kind of surrounded by wonderment, and people have a hard time even relating sometimes to the things we try to describe that happen in our backyard. But for example, literally in my backyard the other day, I went out to chop some wood for our stove and was just enjoying the weekend. And I kind of had a quiet moment, and I stood there and a wolf howled. And it sounded like it was, maybe a mile behind the house. And I thought, it's like noon. That's not typically when I hear wolves howl. Sometimes they come around at night, and I'll hear them when I'm letting the dog out, for the last time in the evening or something. And so I sat there real quiet, and it howled again. And I probably have 100, little stories like that. We're just surrounded by it all the time. And it's there all the time if you're listening for it, and if you're open to it. And we're just surrounded by wonderment there. So if you got your eyes and your ears open, it's always there. Go enjoy it.
think that's the perfect way to wrap up. Thanks for coming and talking to us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Fascinating.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, I would like to. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of What We Do. Thanks again to our guest, John Cataldo. If you like what we do, rate and review the show wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new listeners find the show. If you have questions or want to learn more about a particular job, contact us using the form at go.nps.gov/whatwedopodcast. Thanks.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the What We Do podcast. I'm Jake Frank. Our team of 4 will be interviewing 10 people over the next 10 weeks to take you behind the scenes to share stories from people who work for the National Park Service in the world's first national park. So first things first, hi, team.
Hey, Jake.
Hey, Jake.
How's everybody doing?
Awesome.
Good.
Why don't we do some quick team intros? So if we do, let's say, your name, your title, maybe your division, how long you've been in Yellowstone, what your favorite hobbies are. No, and maybe if there's any other parks you've worked at. Miles.
All right. I'm Miles Barger. I'm the Publications Program Manager here at Yellowstone in the Division of Resource Education and Youth Programs. I've been in Yellowstone for about 3 years this time around. I worked here earlier in my career as well, and I've also worked at Denali National Park and Black Canyon of the Gunnison National Park and at Harper's Ferry Center. You can look that up if you want to know what it is.
Brett, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm the newbie here. I've only been at Yellowstone for about 2 years so far. Before that, I was at Shenandoah National Park for 12 years. And I'm the digital media specialist here, which basically deals with the website, social media, the NPS app, and digital exhibits in the visitor centers. Ashton, how long have you been here?
Well, Yellowstone's actually my first park, and I've been here for about 4 years now as a digital communications specialist for the superintendent's office. So working on similar types of things as Brett, web, social media, and the like. So what about you, Jake?
I'm the old guy here, apparently. I've been here a little less than 8 years, got here in 2016. I've worked at a handful of parks. I started in the Tetons and then went to Geyser, then Carlsbad Caverns, then up to Denali. Miles, me and you, whoop, whoop.
Yep.
And then worked for Rocky, also Miles, whoop, whoop.
That's right.
So Miles is following,
I've been following Jake.
Yeah.
And then Yellowstone, and then I got my first permanent job in Geyser doing media, and then came here permanently. I also am a digital communication specialist like Ashton. I also work in the superintendent's office with Ashton, but it seems like everybody here on the team, we're all involved in media, web, social, photography, videography, kind of a little bit of everything. Podcasting now. Our resume is getting longer the longer we're here, so it's good stuff. Yeah, so now that you know who we are, let's give you some of the highlights of the park. So as far as the employees and the money, Yellowstone has about 750 employees each year, and 350 of those are year-round permanent employees. And in addition to our paid staff, we also have about 450 volunteers that help with various things throughout the park. We have a federal appropriation, so the money that we get from Congress, when a budget's passed, is around $40 million. But it takes at least double that to operate the park each year. So I think last year it was around $81 or $82 million. And, if you're a budget person, you're like, how does it work, to run a park on 80 million if you only get 40 million? And basically we make up the difference through other revenue streams, like, when you come to the park and pay an entrance fee, or if you're a commercial tour operator in the park. And then we also have philanthropic donations. So people who donate to the park or our nonprofit, Yellowstone Forever. And all that money is not even including the major infrastructure project dollars, because some years with projects included, we spend upwards of like $125 million each year.
Yeah. And let's talk about Yellowstone's resources. Yellowstone itself is a pretty big park. We're at 2.2 million acres. Not the largest park in the lower 48. I think we're second. Death Valley is 3 million or something, but we are pretty big, 2.2 million acres. And even more than that, Yellowstone is at the heart of the surrounding area, which is known as the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, which is, if we didn't have these made up straight line boundaries of the park, it's where our wildlife migrate and where we share a lot of our processes and things like that. So it's a huge area. Geologically speaking, Yellowstone is an active volcano, and it sits atop a cooling magma chamber. And when water's heated by the cooling magma chamber, we get hydrothermal features like geysers and hot springs. So that's, I'd say, wildlife, and those are what we're most famous for. And the geysers and hot springs are what Yellowstone was originally set aside to protect. And Yellowstone's actually home to 10,000 hydrothermal features and over half the world's active geysers.
Yeah. So if the volcano goes off, we'll be the first to let you all know.
I don't think we'll be able to let them know.
We'll broadcast live as soon as that happens to let you guys know. So make sure that you subscribe so that you can find that out. So Miles talked about wildlife. Obviously, if you want to see wildlife and those predator-prey relationships, Yellowstone is one of the best places in the world to see some of those interactions play out. So, we got wolves, we got grizzly bears, we got cougars, we got bison, elk, bighorn sheep, even wolverines, which I haven't seen, but hopefully, fingers crossed, I will soon. All sorts of wildlife. But it's also, this is a super special place because of the history. So for over 10,000 years before Yellowstone became the first national park, which happened in 1872, it was a place where American Indians lived and hunted and fished and gathered plants and quarried obsidian and used the thermal waters. And even today, there are 27 tribes with historic and modern connections to the land and resources within the area that we now know as Yellowstone.
Yeah, and in addition to tribal history, Yellowstone is also home to a combined 25 historic sites, landmarks, and districts on the National Register of Historic Places. There are a lot of really neat historic buildings and landmarks and things like that all throughout the park. So we have a lot of cool natural and cultural resources, and that's what brings a lot of people to visit the park. On average, we receive about 4.5 million visits every year, and about 95% of that is in a 6-month period between May and October. So a lot of visitation in the summer, not so much in the winter. But I think that's the best time to visit, in my personal opinion.
I concur. Yeah, winter is pretty awesome.
Yeah. A report showed that tourism to Yellowstone contributes about 6,000 jobs in our gateway communities. So those are the communities that exist at just outside the park at all our entrances, and about $600 million to the local economy in 2022. That's a lot.
That is a lot of money.
A lot of money and a lot of people. And so we, of course, have to have all the infrastructure that you need for all that huge amount of people. And because of that, we have tons of stuff in the park. Of course, we have over 400 miles of roads. We have lots of lodging, buildings, places to eat, bathrooms, of course, trails, all sorts of stuff. And our portfolio of all that stuff totals over $4 billion worth of infrastructure.
Billion,
roads,
like with a B?
Billion with a B.
That's a lot.
Roads, bridges. Then there's the things you don't even think about, like water and wastewater systems. Of course, campgrounds, hotels. Then there's all the employee housing and all the facilities needed for the employees. So we're basically our own little mini state up here. Since 2020, we have invested over $1.5 billion with a B dollars into improving Yellowstone's infrastructure for you and also for future generations of visitors. And there's even more projects in the pipeline.
Yeah, so that is a lot going on, and obviously we can't manage all that alone. So we rely a lot on tribes, elected officials, nonprofit groups, local communities, states, other federal agencies. They all help us to take care of Yellowstone. And when you think of Yellowstone National Park, you think of the natural features, the cultural features, but there's also really important things like hotels, restaurants, gas stations, general stores, and our concession partners run all of those. And our nonprofit partner, Yellowstone Forever, offers educational programs and runs the park stores as well, the bookstores that you see at the visitor centers. So they also support the park through philanthropic dollars that are really important to us.
Yeah, so as you can see, there's no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to Yellowstone. We could go on and on probably all day. There's a lot to talk about. And there's a lot of content about all this stuff and more on natural and cultural resources in the park. And you can find a lot of that information on our park's website, which is nps.gov/YELL.
Yeah. And then, with all of that great information about the natural and cultural resources, we realized that there wasn't really any content around the non-historical human resources of the park. Obviously, we have a ton of history of the people who, were here in the past, but not a lot about the people that are here right now who do the work to keep the lights on in the park year round. And that's when we came up with our idea for our What We Do Wednesdays social media campaign in 2019. And since then, we've been highlighting our employees and what they do through photos and stories on our social media platforms. It's been really well received both internally and externally. We have coworkers all the time. They're like, wow, that was cool. I didn't know that so-and-so did that. And so we thought, hey, why don't we, try to develop some longer form content, and boom, now we got a podcast. What We Do podcast is our new brainchild.
Yes. And it's a pretty awesome brainchild, I think. So with this podcast, we're operating under the assumption that if something is interesting to us, then it'll also be interesting to you, our listeners. And that being said, one of our intended audiences is current and future NPS employees too. So we intend to cover some information that may get a bit jargony, like how to get jobs in Yellowstone and, all the things that make Yellowstone work. And if you know anything about government agencies, we love acronyms and special terms.
TLAs.
That's right. Exactly. TLAs.
Yeah. 3-letter acronyms.
So to help you out with all those TLAs and other terms, we've created a web page with a glossary of terms and definitions. And you can find that at go.nps.gov/What We Do podcast.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be referencing that sometimes. I literally had a meeting yesterday that was a BMA IDT. That was that was the calendar invite. But generally speaking, here are 3 things that we think that you should know about jobs in the federal government. So this is kind of the insider's look into getting jobs in the federal government from those of us who have done that a few times. And the first thing that you really need to know about is usajobs.gov. This is the website where all government jobs are posted to. So if you're interested in applying for jobs at Yellowstone or in the National Park Service or in any federal agency, really, you need to get familiar with that website. So after you listen to this episode, after you hit subscribe, go to usajobs.gov, create a profile and check out what jobs are on there, because there is a lot going on there, especially across not just the National Park Service, but the federal government in general. So highly recommend that you use the resume builder if you've never applied for government positions before. Resumes are a little bit different than they are in the private sector. They're not the one pager that you often use in the private sector. They're a little bit longer because you have to prove why you're proficient in all the skills required for the position. So that's why I recommend that resume builder. It kind of helps get you started when you haven't applied for a government job before. And I'd also recommend that you set alerts for saved searches for positions that you find that you're interested in. So if you listen to an episode and we interview someone that is doing a job that you think is really cool, go on usajobs.gov and maybe set an alert so it'll email you anytime that job comes up. We could go a lot more in depth about writing resumes for government jobs, but that would take way too long here. Boring. Yeah. We're not going to do that. But just know about usajobs.gov. That's a huge first step.
Yeah. And the second thing that we think you should know about jobs in the federal government is there are 3 main types of positions. So you'll see seasonal positions, term positions, and permanent positions. So first, the seasonal positions, those usually last for a specific amount of time. during the year. So, for example, in Yellowstone, we hire seasonal workers for the summer and winter seasons, and those can last about 5 or 6 months or so.
I think it's 1,039 hours is the max. So
Yes.
1 hour short of 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And then the second type, those are term positions, and those are usually project based. So maybe a park needs to hire someone to help with a specific type of project going on in that park. They'll hire this person, and that term position usually lasts for like 1 year, but it usually will not exceed 4 years. And then lastly, permanent positions. And those are your typical year-round permanent jobs, which is what all 4 of us who are on this podcast today have here in Yellowstone.
We're very lucky.
Very
Yes.
lucky. Yeah. And the last thing are pay scales. So there's 4 types of pay scales in the government. We have the federal wage schedule, the law enforcement officer general schedule, the general schedule, and the executive and senior level. So wage grade or WG, these are like our trades and our craft and labor employees. And the idea is that, those wages are connected to the wages that are in the same, where the park is located. So if you're getting paid the same amount for the people that are doing the same kind of work in your area. And that's like the people who are in our facility maintenance and operations division. Law enforcement officers, obviously, those are our park rangers, the ones that carry the sidearms that are in, and they're out there, protecting the visitors and the resources. And then the GS is basically everyone else in Yellowstone minus one person. And that one person is our superintendent. We have, once you've risen to a certain level in government, you can apply it to the senior executive series. And there's only a handful of parks that even have SES positions. I think it's like Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Everglades, and a few other parks. They have SES superintendents. Otherwise, most of those positions are at regional or national levels. But within the first 3, each pay scale, so whether you're wage grade, GS, or LEO, there's 15 grades, so 1 through 15, and then each grade has 10 steps, 1 through 10. So, for example, you might hear someone say, like, I'm a GS 11-4 or 11 step 4, and that means they're on the general schedule, grade 11 step 4. And the reason we explain all this is because all of this information is public knowledge. So when you apply for a job, you can actually see what you'll start at and what you can max out to. It's all public information on the Office of Personnel Management site, or OPM. I don't want to get out of this without using an acronym.
All right. So Yellowstone is a big park. It's got a lot of employees and a lot of important issues going on all the time. That's part of the fun of this podcast. Even the people who work here, we don't know everything that's going on. That is definitely true. I feel like I learn about new projects or jobs or things on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and with 750 employees, I've already met a few coworkers that I didn't even know I had doing this podcast. So it's been a lot of fun. We hope you enjoy those conversations as much as we have, and kind of develop an appreciation for what it takes to keep Yellowstone, this huge national park, up and running.
And, maybe some of our listeners will be our future coworkers. Who knows?
That would be awesome.
That would be cool. Anything else, team?
I don't think so.
No.
I think that does it.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we hope you.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is what we do. I'm Brett Rayburn.
And I'm Jake Frank.
So I have a question for you to kick this off.
Okay.
What's the biggest fish that you've ever caught?
The biggest fish I've ever caught, I used to live in Alaska, and I went halibut fishing, and I caught like a 40-pound halibut.
Okay.
That's the biggest I've ever caught.
That's way bigger than I thought you were going to say. I was expecting
And that's like a
much less impressive size.
Well, that's a fairly unimpressive halibut.
Okay.
So for that species anyway.
All right. Well, you've got me beat.
Are you big into fishing?
No, about the only fishing I do is when I'm fishing through the freezer for frozen cod that I get from the store. So that's about as much as I do.
Before you cook it, do you like hold it out way in front of you and have someone take a picture so it looks bigger?
I have been known to do that.
All right.
Yeah. Follow my Instagram for all that content. So you've caught some pretty impressive fish. It sounds like.
Not really.
If you turn over that paper in front of you, there's something on there that I would like you to try to pronounce. You have not seen this before, so this is.
Joe, right. Let's see. Can I sound it out? So, Oncorhynchus clarkii lewisii. Was that how I was way off?
I actually don't know. This is like one of those trivia questions I don't even know the right answer to. So sure, you did well.
All right.
That's better than I would have done.
This scene, but my guess is that this is the binomial name for the Yellowstone cutthroat trout?
Yes, that is the scientific name for the West Slope cutthroat trout.
The West Slope, not the Yellowstone.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
And so today we're going to talk to somebody who probably can pronounce it better than you just did. Although I still think that was a pretty good guess. Our guest today is Pat Bigelow, a fisheries biologist who spends a lot of her time on the waters of Yellowstone National Park. So welcome, Pat. How's it going?
Hey, Brett, and hey, Jake. It's going great. It's a beautiful day today.
Yeah,
it is.
And you did pretty good, Oncorhynchus.
Oncorhynchus. All right. So I was in the wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I loved the lewisii clarkii.
Is that how you say it? Or is it a long I?
That works. Lewisii clarkii. Yep.
That's awesome.
All right.
I wonder where that came from.
I don't speak a lot of Latin.
So I guess we'll just jump right into it. How long have you been working as a fisheries biologist? Well, as any job, how long have you been at Yellowstone National Park?
I've been here in this job for 23 years.
Wow.
I've been working in fisheries for 36 years, probably.
So fresh out of middle school.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
I was really fortunate that I got some great opportunities early in life.
Very cool.
And so how did you get your start here 23 years ago?
Actually, my first fish job was here in 1979.
Wow. Okay.
I was in Bozeman working a summer job, and I went down to the unemployment office to see, if I could just get something better. And there was a poster up on the wall for Young Adult Conservation Corps in Yellowstone National Park. And I jumped at it. It sounded interesting. I came down here. We had I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Yak Camp, but when we were actual Corps members, we had a girls' dorm, boys' dorm, and a dining hall. And 6 Corps members to a room. You each had a bunk bed, a foot locker, and half of a clothes locker, and no dividers or anything like that. You definitely felt like you had just been recruited into some kind of institution.
Some ways it is that, maybe.
Yeah. But it was great because we had 100 Corps members who all worked for different offices in the park. And I was very fortunate. A friend of mine and I that started at the same time to work with Fish and Wildlife Service. And back then, Fish and Wildlife Service did the fisheries work in Yellowstone.
When did that change? That went from fisheries
to Park Service?
Yeah, to Park Service.
I think it was in 96.
Okay.
So Fish and Wildlife Service started here even before the Park Service because of the unique fisheries opportunities and the Yellowstone cutthroat in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And then they established a research station in the 50s. They had a hatchery here early on, early 20s, 30s, into the 50s. And then after that, they kind of went more to a research station. And then they had a management office, which is who I worked for, that advised the Park Service, kind of like a fish and game agency, advises the state on how to set their regulations. Fish and Wildlife Service kind of kept the Park Service up to date on their.
And my history is not great, but if I remember reading, it's even before the National Park Service, there was like the predecessor to the Fish and Wildlife Services who stocked the lakes and did a lot of the fishery stuff in Yellowstone.
Correct. U.S. Fish Commission back even as early as 1889.
Yeah.
We're doing some stocking in Yellowstone National Park.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot of history.
Yeah. Yeah. Fisheries history in the park is really kind of a reflection of fisheries management history for the country, really.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. So when you started, did you know, it sounds like you kind of just saw a poster and got a little lucky in that way. Did you know that there were jobs where people worked with fish in national parks?
I hate to say, I probably shouldn't even tell you this, but when
We can edit it out if we need to.
when I first moved to Bozeman, one of my coworkers said, "Well, have you been to Yellowstone Park yet?" Because I was trying to figure out what to do for the weekend. And I said, "What do you mean a park? Is it, like Ferris wheel?"
Yeah, does it have slides?
I've had visitors ask me where the zip lines are. So yeah, I think that's a.
Well, to be fair, they're in West Yellowstone, so
Well, that's
Yeah.
true.
and I want to say I was very young then. So
Sure, sure, lots to learn. Yeah. So you were pleasantly surprised that there were actually jobs where you could do that.
it was awesome.
Cool.
And one of my first full weeks working for the Fish and Wildlife Service, they were doing their annual survey on Yellowstone Lake of the cutthroat trout. And so it meant spending a week on a boat gill netting on the lake. And we spent a night in the Park Service cabin on Peel Island because we were doing work in that area and we wanted to stay close to it. And unlike typical weather on Yellowstone Lake, it was bluebird days and flat, calm water the whole full week. And then the cutthroat that we were catching, if you haven't ever seen a cutthroat trout, they are a beautiful fish.
Can you describe them for those of us who haven't seen one?
So they're called cutthroat because they have a red slash on either side under their jaw. And they, kind of a typical trout. They have, the same, body form, and then black spots more on the tail, and you get less as you move forward toward the head. But, they can get really brightly colored. They tend to be olive, yellowy, brown, and they can, especially during spawning season, they can get these brilliant red sides and opercular plates and stuff. They're just beautiful.
That's cool.
When we came out on the boat this summer, when you guys were doing your research, you were pulling out some hogs. They were huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've caught a fish bigger than Jake's 40 pound.
Not a cutthroat.
It's all about competition here. So describe to us like a typical day. So obviously there's going to be a lot of variance, but if someone asked you what your typical day like is as a fisheries biologist, what was it like? What would you tell them?
Well, so it does really vary a lot. Obviously in the winter, we're not doing a lot of field work. We are in the office kind of processing everything that happened last year and trying to plan ahead for next year, which includes hiring, which can be a lot of work. Doing a lot of presentations to let people know what we know and where we think we need to go next and all that kind of thing. But the field work in the summer, all my work is on Yellowstone Lake, and it's a beautiful lake. I oversee some contract work on the lake, which is 3 to 4 crews, sometimes 5, of netters to try to depress the lake trout population. Lake trout are an invasive species on Yellowstone Lake, and they'll eat the cutthroat trout. And so we're trying to eliminate them. We're not likely going to eliminate them, but hopefully we're going to suppress them to the point where they're no longer having an impact on the cutthroat trout population. And so we have these gillnet crews that will put out miles of gillnet and lift it every day to remove the lake trout. We also have a telemetry operation where we purposely put acoustic tags in male lake trout and let them go, and then kind of relocate them so we can give that information to the netters to help zero in on their day on, where to put their nets and stuff. And
so that term I've heard that I heard it with something else though. It's like invasive species. You can you put a tracker on them, then they go to where they betray their friends. This whole idea of like a Judas species. Can you talk a little bit about that? That's that always made me laugh.
The idea of Judas fish
Yeah.
is you put a tag in them that you can follow, and they take you to where their friends are and betray their friends. And it's not, we pretty much know where all the lake trout habitat is, but they move around a lot, and depending on the time of year and the water temperatures, they'll be at different depths. So a lot of times the Judas fish helps you really zero in on the depths to be fishing at, which also helps you avoid the cutthroat trout if you know exactly what depths the lake trout are at. And so if I'm on a boat where we're doing the tagging, we'll collect lake trout from the netters that are still in really lively condition and do surgery and implant. First, make sure they're males. We don't want to tag the females because they're the ones with the reproductive potential. So we want to make sure we kill all the females, and then implant the tags, make sure the fish recover so that they'll behave normally when we release them and let them go. Or if it's actually tracking the fish, we have 2 hydrophones in the water on either side of the boat, which helps us give a direction to find the fish so we can zero in on their location. And so then you're basically on the lake driving predetermined transects all day until you pick up a fish, and then you zero on that fish, and then you continue on your way.
And for like the listeners who haven't seen Yellowstone Lake or been to it, it's a huge lake, so that's not an easy task.
Yeah, it takes us about 4 days to cover the whole lake.
Yeah, wow.
And we don't actually even cover the whole lake because we avoid the really deep habitat because we aren't expecting to see any lake trout out there, and we're not going to set nets there anyway.
And then I think a good backstory is like we talk about lake trout being invasive versus the Yellowstone cutthroat. I mean, I guess is there a reason why we like as managers prefer one over the other? Like why are we trying to get rid of lake trout?
So the cutthroat trout, Yellowstone cutthroat trout, like I've said already a couple of times, they're just beautiful, but they are the native species in Yellowstone Lake. Yellowstone Lake is the most important population of Yellowstone cutthroat trout for that species, and just sheer numbers. And they evolved with only one other native species, which is the long-nosed dace that is, gets to maybe 6 inches and is very much along just the shorelines.
That's the fish I would catch.
So they're just, the cutthroat trout are naive when it comes to larger fish predator, piscivore. And the lake trout are native to the Great Lakes area, and they're also a beautiful fish, but they are a voracious predator. And so you take a really naive fish and then a really excellent predator and put them together, and it's just not good for the cutthroat trout. And the lake trout, I think the oldest one on record was 62 years old.
Lake trout?
Not from Yellowstone, but just species wise. So if we weren't out there taking out the lake trout, nobody else would be either. They reside deeper in the lake. They live longer. They get bigger. They have a lot higher reproductive potential than the cutthroat trout. And if left unchecked, they would decimate the cutthroat trout population.
And when you say like no one else would get them, you mean like other predators,
right?
Like bears and fish or bears and birds and otters and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Like birds and otters, most predators tend to target the fish when they're shallow, and the lake trout don't spend much time being shallow. And then when the lake trout get big, they're too big. Like an osprey might try to grab a big fish, and then I haven't seen this personally, but one of my coworkers has seen an osprey grab even a cutthroat that was too big for it, and then it couldn't fly off, and it actually drowned.
Oh wow!
Because they have a hard time letting go of a fish once they get their talons through
it's
it.
like the monkey with the banana in the barrel situation.
But yeah, lake trout, well, they're impressive in their ability to eat other fish. They can eat a fish. The only thing that stops them is how wide they can get their mouth open, and they can eat a fish 2/3 their own size.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Can you do that, Jake?
No. Yeah. It's like a 150-pound fish.
Burrito. That's a big burrito.
Yeah.
So you obviously know a lot about fish. And so that's an important skill to have as a fisheries biologist. What, aside from that, or maybe not even aside from that, what do you think is the most important skill for someone who thinks that that's a really cool job and might be interested in applying for jobs like that?
it's probably similar to most jobs. I think the most important thing is to have a passion for what you're doing and a positive attitude and be flexible in what you're doing day to day. If you want to actually go into fisheries, a Bachelor of Science is an important aspect of your education. Typically, you're going to want to end up going back to school to specialize and get a master's degree. I would highly recommend for anybody thinking that way to get a lot of experience, or as much as you can between your masters, before your masters, and after your bachelor's. It helps you get a better idea of what's available, what kind of work you can be working in, and gives you really good skills. So then when you do go back to get your master's degree, you are a better candidate because you're not learning everything all at once.
Oh, that's great advice. And you probably want to like go out on a boat and make sure you don't get seasick, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, do people get seasick on the lake?
They have, yeah.
I'd imagine it gets choppy.
Yeah. And
That'd be tough.
We have had a few volunteers come out from different places, even other fisheries biologists that come out and, they're really excited to give you a hand and be helpful. And
Then they're looking for the horizon.
Yeah, then they're a liability.
I've been there before.
Well, and a quick follow up with the masters. Does it matter if you're specializing? Like, say if somebody's like, my goal is to work in Yellowstone, do they need to get a master's related to the species that are here, or can you, like, if you happen to be, say, getting your master's in some other fish species, does that qualify you? Like, can you learn what you need to on the job, or does it really help to focus in on the actual species that you'll be studying in the park that you want to end up in?
I think the broader the education you have, the better. And you can focus in when you get to the particular job. Because the other thing is, even though Yellowstone might be your goal, that might not be your next step.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah,
to
that's
be
good
prepared.
advice.
And then also, it's good to think outside of the box sometimes too. And if you have more familiarity with other habitats, other species and stuff, that, you can bring in maybe a new perspective that somehow is different than what people have thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like your typical day is pretty cool, especially in the summer when you're out on a boat. What is your favorite part about your job?
You can probably tell I love Yellowstone Lake. So being on the lake is awesome. But I think the most rewarding, two things are most rewarding, but one is I work with amazing people, and being able to sit down with a coworker and talk about strategies and, how things are going, what happened over here, how we can pull that together, how we can best use our crews, and to just keep making things move forward is super rewarding. But then also taking somebody, like we typically have student volunteers every summer, and they typically don't have much for experience. So taking somebody who really knows nothing about what we're doing and bringing them through a season and seeing them increase their skills and increase their confidence and get more sure about what they want to do and be excited about protecting the resource. That's pretty awesome. But then the other part is actually seeing the work that we're doing make a definite impact on protecting Yellowstone Park's resources. That's really rewarding as well.
Yeah. Well, and we'll let you slide, even though you gave us 3 favorites.
Yeah, we said one, but we got 3.
But
it's okay.
That's your one mulligan for this podcast. Okay.
Oops.
So with that, this is the hard question. What is the toughest part about your job?
That's a really good question too. You can get frustrated with the inability to do things as quick as you want because you have to go through proper procedures to make sure, just because I think something's really good to do doesn't mean it is. So there's a lot of checks and balances that you have to go through. Surprisingly.
Red tape?
Yeah. And then, so that can be really frustrating. And then also, supervision can be really challenging. It's important to be able to work well with people and not just work well with them, but communication is such an important aspect of all parts of life. And even though everybody communicates every day, it just amazes me that we all have so much more to learn on how to communicate better. So if I have an employee, for instance, how to get the best, how to help them be their best and get the best out of them can be really challenging, especially if for some reason they shouldn't have taken the job and don't really want to be there.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you're doing hiring right now. How many people are a part of your operation?
So in the fisheries program, we have Todd Cool's our leader. Brian Ertel and I are both full fish biologists that have been here quite a long time. Andy Pachani is a new streams biologist who's doing great work. And then right now we have 2 student biologists. They're in the Pathways program, Cody Vender and Drew McDonald. And each of us hires, with the exception of Todd, but each of us that are in the biologist series hire 2 technicians and 1 intern for the summer.
So you guys are a big operation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have the contract crew that does a lot of the suppression netting, not all of it, but most of it. And they will have up to 20 people.
Yeah. And there's a lot of time, effort, and money that go into the fisheries program. Yeah.
Yep. And Cody and I work on the lake mostly. Brian Ertel and Andy cover streams outside of the Yellowstone Lake area.
Is that kind of how you divide it up? It's like the lake.
They're the ones that get seasick.
And then everything else. Is that how you divide your guys' work, is the lake and then everything that's not Yellowstone Lake? That's kind of the dividing line. Yeah.
And Brian focuses more on Yellowstone cutthroat, where Andy focuses a little bit more on the West Slope cutthroat. But since they're both doing river stream work, they work together a lot.
Gotcha.
So you talked a little bit about kind of the tougher parts of the job. So what is it about the Park Service that keeps you here and brought you here and keeps you here, I guess?
Well, just the protection of the natural resources, keeping the environment as intact as possible, and just the ecosystem function and all that. Those are all great buzzwords, but it's the beauty of everything working together that really draws you in, and it makes you really enjoy it.
Yeah, and some of our listeners might not be super familiar with the National Park Service mission. We all had to get it tattooed on us when we took the jobs, and Jake's is on his lower back, I think, right? Is it still there?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
but essentially, the mission is preserving the natural and cultural resources, like you said, for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of this and future generations. So, and you've touched on this, but how does your job contribute to this mission? It seems like a pretty direct and easy to see thing.
We're spending a lot of time and effort suppressing the lake trout population so that the cutthroat trout population in Yellowstone Lake can thrive. And because that's the major population for that species of fish, it helps that whole species thrive. And it's a beautiful fish. Did I say that already?
Yeah. You can say that one twice. That's okay.
And then what I've learned here, not being a big fisherman or person who fishes, I don't know what the non-gendered version of that is, but people love to fish. It's like crazy how many people are here in the summer. So it's and the whole idea of being the homeland of the Yellowstone cutthroat trout. I mean, it's this is the world's largest population of that fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people come here to catch that, and it seems like protecting it, and then people have that direct enjoyment. I mean, it seems like everybody appreciates being able to get out there and catch that big fish and put it on the gram.
Yeah, and not only, think about going out on Yellowstone Lake. This is a huge lake, and there's 3 buildings on the entire lake. I mean, maybe a couple more, depending on how far away from the water you want to measure, but it's just spectacular.
Yeah,
you're out there.
Mm-hmm.
You're out there. All right. Well, before we wrap up, we're going to get into what we call the nitty gritty here. So I don't want to scare listeners away. This is a fair warning. There's going to be some government jargon, but fear not, we've got your back. So we have an introductory episode along with some links that we're going to put in the show notes that will explain all this in detail. So that said, for people interested in this type of career, and you've kind of already talked about the education aspect of it. So if I want to be a fisheries biologist, what's your job series in USA Jobs, series and GS level and all that nitty gritty?
So my GS level is GS 11, and my job series is fisheries biologist 0482. And then like a lot of the seasonals that we're hiring this summer, they are fishery biological technicians, parentheses fisheries. And because there are a lot of different biological technicians, and they're all in the GS 0404 series.
Awesome. Cool. And aside from the education aspect, is there any other formal training that someone needs to have to apply for this position, or?
Not formal. A bachelor's is great. But like I said, the more experience you can get with different agencies, different areas, the better off you're going to be.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any other advice for people interested in that career path aside from what you've said already?
It's a great career. It's really fun. I've worked, when I left here from my first 4 years that I was here with the Fish and Wildlife Service, I did some work with the state, Wyoming Game and Fish. I worked with Fish and Wildlife Service in California, Northern Idaho, Washington. Every job I've ever had has been really fun.
Come work with Pat, is what she's saying. All right. Well, before we let you go, we like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast one final question. This one's my favorite. So what is your favorite story or memory in a national park? It doesn't have to be in Yellowstone, although you've been here a while. So there's a good chance it will be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be, a trip you took during annual leave or something. But do you have any defining story or memory from a national park?
There's so many to choose from. This one's really fish related though, so I'll share it. We were doing a snorkel survey on the Olympic Peninsula, and we were snorkeling Chinook salmon, which get quite big. Spring Chinook salmon in particular, they like to hide their head. They're kind of like a little kid in that if their eyes are covered, they think you can't see them. And so when you're snorkeling for them, you got to really look at the root wads and things, because they kind of stick their head in the root wad and then you might miss them if you're not really looking closely. So I was coming down this stretch of stream that was actually pretty wide and flat and no cover. And the spring Chinook, I could see him. He was just in the mid-water column in front of me over this gravel bar. And he saw me and he just sunk down and sat on the bottom. And I was getting closer because I was coming downstream. And as I got closer, he got as close to the bottom as he could. And then he actually rolled over and laid on his side.
Until I did.
Yeah. Until I went by. And then he just took off.
That's awesome.
If he was wearing a turtleneck shirt, he would have slumped into it.
It was just so funny to see him actually trying to hide where he had nothing to hide.
That's amazing. And you'd never heard of that type of behavior before, or is it just something you hadn't seen before?
I had not heard or seen it. So it just made me laugh.
That's awesome. So you're making scientific observations on your vacations even.
Actually, that was work.
Oh, that was work. Well, work, vacation. Yeah. Sometimes the line gets blurred. Right.
Can I tell you my favorite question?
Yeah. That you've ever been asked, you mean? Yeah.
Somebody once asked me why all the Civil War battles were fought in national parks.
That is a great question. What is that? That's a causation. What's the whole thing? Correlation, not causation. Yeah.
What was your answer?
I honestly thought they were kidding, so I started laughing.
So you just laughed.
And I said, "Well, people were very civil back then." And then I could see by the look, he wasn't kidding. And so I got real apologetic real fast.
I think that happens to all of us. You get caught off guard with the question because people joke with us all the time.
Yeah.
They ask us silly questions. So,
well, and especially like the people with dry humor, that's like really hard to tell. It's like, I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us. It was really cool hearing about your job and learning a little bit more about fish too. So I'm excited to go fishing. I think when the season starts.
I think I am also excited to fish, but I have this weird, I like the touching of fish. I don't know how hard to grab them or not grab. I feel like I'm like strangling them.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like mess their slime up, but then they know when I'm not holding them tight enough, and then they flop around and then I drop them. So I just
what's the safe hand? Can we get an extra credit question here? What's the safe handling for someone who's fishing? What do you wear gloves? Do you not wear gloves?
We wear gloves.
Yeah.
The water's really cold for no other reason, but it helps protect the fish and it helps give you a little bit milder grip, but you don't want to grip them tight.
I feel like I'm going to squeeze the life out of them.
Yeah. And if you're angling,
don't grip it like a burrito.
Right.
Do it like
if you're angling, if you can keep them in the water while you're handling them, that keeps them calmer too.
I've seen that hashtag, keep them wet.
Yeah. Okay. And grip it like a burrito, not a baby.
Yeah.
Right. Which, anyways, we'll leave it there. Anyways, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's great talking with you, Pat. Yeah. Thanks for joining.
That's it for this week's episode of What We Do. Thanks again to our guest, Pat Bigelow. And if you like what we do, rate and review the show wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new people find the show, so we really appreciate it. If you have questions or you want to learn more about a particular job, contact us using the form at go.nps.gov/whatwedopodcast. Thanks for listening.
So I'm out here in Yellowstone National Park's Lamar Valley. I'm not too far from the Lamar Ranger Station, or what was historically known as the Buffalo Ranch. And I gotta say, this is absolutely my favorite place in the park. It is gorgeous. It's this wide open valley surrounded by grassy hills, sagebrush, and some high mountains off in the distance. And right now in midsummer, it is covered in bison. There has to be several hundred animals out here right now. It's just a really impressive sight. So it's the bison rut, or the mating season, and while these animals are out here doing their thing and trying to attract mates, they have some really pretty charismatic behavioral displays. But it's the vocalizations, or these bellows, that are so prevalent this time of year that I think are so cool. So I'm out here to check it out. Oh yeah, here we go. It's a bison jam. They're crossing the road. It's the males that are making that grunting noise, and every time they do it, they stick their tongues out. So it's just the wildest thing to watch. pretty spectacular. I'm crazy about these animals. I'm Jennifer Jarrett, and I am an associate editor for Yellowstone Science here in Yellowstone National Park. For Yellowstone National Park and the Acoustic Atlas at Montana State University, this is telemetry.
So you're brand new, so I'll just let's. One. Oh, you do have one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll take an extra. We'll have an extra. Awesome. So you've used them before, right?
No, I just got one.
Okay.
I'm standing on the side of the loop road in northern Yellowstone with biologist Andrew Ray and his intern Casey Fitzgibbon. Before we hike away from the road, Andrew is explaining how to deploy bear spray in case we have a close encounter with a bear. He holds the 8-inch canister of pepper spray in one hand and puts his thumb on the plastic safety.
What you need to know, right? You got to take the safety off to be able to pull the trigger, right? And it's not an easy thing to do, but you just lift that up.
Yeah.
All right. But if something's coming, we're all gonna sort of stand abreast. Mm-hmm. We're gonna phase it. We're gonna talk to it, but we're gonna have this at the ready. And part of having this at the ready is having your safety off, okay? Because otherwise, you're just pushing down on the safety.
Andrew spreads out a map across the tailgate of his truck and points to a spot in the mountains above us.
So just to give you guys a quick orientation. So we're here on the loop road, and you know the big blacktail ponds. We're over here. We're gonna hike up, and our goal is to hit site number 2 there. So it's a nice little pond sitting on the top of the hill, fantastic views, and it's a great spot for chorus frogs and tiger salamanders.
Andrew is a biologist with the National Park Service's Inventory and Monitoring Division.
Yeah, I get to spend my summer knee-deep in these habitats that most people don't take time to wade into. And I get to explore them.
It's May, and snow is still melting off the higher elevations in the park. Hiking up the hill, far above the road, we bump into 7 or 8 elk moving off into the trees. We start talking about how the haunting sounds of elk bugling in the fall are one of the signature sounds of the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, so just as much as that sort of leaves an impression, right? Like that rich, real, authentic sound of wildlife, that's what chorus frogs are. You know, that's the sound of a marsh. If marshes make sound, that's the sound of a marsh.
And Andrew says we'll know the frogs when we hear them. They sing, sometimes a few at a time, and sometimes a full chorus of many frogs. Moving over the hill, we see a small pond below us. There's a wet grassy area leading into it. We think that we hear a few chorus frogs, but they quiet down as we approach. So they get all shy when you...
Yeah, really? But that's the really cool thing about frogs is once you sit there and you sit still, they'll resume what they were doing, you know, so they'll suspend calling for a little bit and go into that duck and cover mode. But once you sit there and they realize, you know, you're not a threat, they'll resume what they're doing, so they'll go right back to calling.
Huh.
Yeah.
We sit quietly for a few minutes, and then, one by one, they start singing again.
It's pretty fun to try to break it down, right? And like, it sounded like 2 individuals were down there for a while, then a third chimed in, and there was at least one here. And they're actually really rapid calls, so it's just a second or two, and it's like you're running your thumb down the tines of a comb, that sound, right? So you're hearing it, and then they'll do maybe 20 of those, or 25 of those in a minute, so it's just... they're really blasting it out, advertising where they are. Now I hear one over there.
Okay, yeah, so what are they doing right now?
They're advertising their presence, right? So they're standing, they're ultimately trying to attract a mate. but they're letting other males know they're present, that they've got this spot of the pond, and then they're letting a female know where they are. They're so small. The vocalizations can help bring in the female.
Sometimes the frogs will chorus from April all the way into July. And when they really get going, the sound can be intense, like this. But Andrew says their full sound isn't even the most unusual part about chorus frogs. Later in the year, as late fall comes to Yellowstone,
they're looking for a place to go hibernate. We can't see it, obviously, but people who have measured it have started to see changes in their blood chemistry. So essentially, they're creating an antifreeze.
Yeah, he said antifreeze. It's a pretty amazing adaptation, allowing them to survive winter in Yellowstone. A winter that can last up to 6 months. The chorus frogs make their version of antifreeze by producing extra glucose in their blood.
And they're in that state as long as it's snowy. But it's absolutely remarkable to me that they overwinter just inches below the surface.
And the glucose in their blood protects their cells from collapsing while frozen.
And what happens is upwards of 2/3 of their body is frozen. So completely frozen, with a heart that has stopped altogether, limbs that don't move, and lungs that don't function.
As crazy as that is, freezing just below the surface turns out to have a big benefit as winter comes to a close.
When temperatures start to warm in the spring, the exact opposite happens, right? You start to get a little bit of heart and lung function, and eventually their extremities start to move. And the cool part about that is when you're really close to the surface and you get some early warm spring days, you're the first to respond. If the other species of amphibians are a meter down below the frost line and deep into burrows, the temperatures aren't changing as rapidly as they are at the surface. So these frogs are the first to get into ponds as soon as the ice and snow is off the surface. And so they're in the ponds earliest because they're the closest to the surface.
This gives the chorus frogs a potential advantage over other amphibians and more time to take advantage of seasonal wetlands that may dry up later in the summer. Yellowstone is home to 4 other species of amphibians, including western tiger salamanders, Columbia spotted frogs, western toads, and plains spadefoot toads. There is one kind of environment, though, that they all need: shallow water habitats. Biologists are concerned about how much of this habitat will be available in the future. As temperatures in the Earth's climate rise, these shallow water habitats could dry up.
One of the consequences of a warmer climate is less snow and less water to fill places like this. So the sounds that we hear that are unique to this place and the organisms that are present in these habitats, they don't have the ability to escape that. They don't have the ability to move away from that. There will certainly be water and snow in Yellowstone long into the future. But a river with fish or a deep lake with fish is very different than this place that's before us. And so I guess the thing I want people to think about is there are biodiversity and physical consequences to a warming temperature. And these sort of special habitats that are so biologically rich, they're the most threatened by a changing climate.
In one warm, dry year during the monitoring study, the shallow water habitat shrunk by 40%. This led to a 50% reduction in breeding pairs of boreal chorus frogs. Andrew thinks it's likely that we'll see more of that in the future. And the potential for shrinking amphibian habitat isn't just in Yellowstone.
I mean, these are a group of organisms that were here before dinosaurs were here, okay? And so they're going to be here probably after humans are gone. But I think we can expect a future that has fewer amphibian species
than were here historically. And when I say here, I don't necessarily mean Yellowstone, but I mean on Earth. And there are places where there really is a crisis, where amphibians are blinking out.
Andrew says that the northern leopard frog, which used to be present just south of Yellowstone in Grand Teton National Park, hasn't been seen in decades. And so understanding what is going on with the remaining amphibians in Yellowstone depends on the data that Andrew and others are collecting.
So we study 31 watersheds around Yellowstone and Grand Teton, spread all around the park, or all around both parks. And they represent just, 1%? I think there's 3,370 watersheds, and we study just 31 of them. But we revisit those watersheds every year, and we survey all of the ponds in those watersheds. And it's our hope that in another decade or in 2 decades, then we'll have a data set that really does allow us to talk about long-term change. So while a warm year now may be followed by a cool, wet year, our future in this place looks drier, which I think our data suggests means fewer ponds that support breeding chorus frogs, but also fewer ponds that support breeding Columbia spotted frogs, tiger salamanders, and western toads. And while those are our vital signs, there's lots of other wetland-dependent species: beavers, trumpeter swans, moose, bats. Some bats are specialists to wetlands. And so if you have fewer wetlands on the landscape, you have fewer opportunities for those individuals to access water. So while we're studying frogs, we like to remind people that they serve as just a proxy for other species that are dependent on wetlands.
We're standing near the same small pond when the weather starts to shift. Darker clouds move in off the horizon, and Andrew and Casey and I decide to pack up and head back towards the trucks. As we're getting ready to go, I asked Andrew why they chose boreal chorus frogs to monitor in the first place.
We know that amphibians don't occupy every wetland in Yellowstone. We'd be naive to think that they do. But we know species like boreal chorus frogs from our monitoring. They occur in, a third of the wetland habitats throughout Yellowstone and Grand Teton. That's high elevation, that's low elevation, that's near a river, that's far away from a river. They can use shallow, isolated habitats. And using something that's common and widespread is valuable. And we want to keep those things common. If those things become imperiled, the things that we know historically were common, then that should give us pause. That should make us think about what might be driving that change.
Biologists view amphibians as a kind of litmus test for big picture changes in the environment and the overall health of the environment. But Andrew thinks that amphibians have a value beyond just being a vital sign for the park.
I think it's relatable because a lot of us have had experiences with amphibians, and we can still have those today. But amphibians, like so many organisms, are experiencing declines, and it's an opportunity to discuss our impacts, societal impacts on biology, but it's also, a place to talk about discovery and to talk about biodiversity and to talk about climate change and to talk about the value of parks and protected places. So to me, why do we care? Because Yellowstone is a place that's still intact. And in terms of the lower 48, it's a really special place because it has its full complement of species. And so it's important that we look not only at grizzly bears and wolves and bison, but it's important that we also look at frogs and fish and microorganisms. The most basic and fundamental part is that it is a part of Yellowstone's biodiversity.
For Yellowstone National Park, I'm Scott Christie.
This podcast is supported in part by Yellowstone Forever and the Eyes on Yellowstone program. Eyes on Yellowstone is made possible by Canon USA. This program represents the largest corporate donation for wildlife conservation in the park. This is telemetry. For Yellowstone National Park and the Acoustic Atlas at Montana State University, this is telemetry.
It's a cold October morning on Yellowstone Lake. Heavy frost covers the dock and the last few boats in the marina, while fresh snow blankets the Absaroka Mountains in the distance. Yellowstone National Park fisheries supervisor Todd Kuhl starts up a cold aluminum boat and scrapes frost off the windshield.
Cold? Yeah. We'll let it warm up a little bit, huh?
We're headed out to join fisheries crews working on the lake. Along the way, Todd is thinking about the history of the native Yellowstone cutthroat trout.
Really, the park, and especially Yellowstone Lake, lies right at the core of the distribution, the range-wide distribution of the Yellowstone cutthroat trout subspecies.
Yellowstone Lake is huge, roughly twice the area of Washington, D.C. It is the largest high-altitude lake in North America, and it is thought to have held the single biggest population of Yellowstone cutthroat trout in the world.
Estimates were in the range of about 4 million or so catchable cutthroat trout in Yellowstone Lake. I mean, that's a lot of cutthroat in a system.
This was back in the early 1990s. And in those days, people used to say that there were so many fish you could walk on their backs across the Yellowstone River when they spawned. Tourists and anglers gathered by the thousands just to see the fish moving up spawning streams. One year, over 300,000 people visited La Hardy Rapids and Fishing Bridge to watch the brightly colored cutthroat trout.
Fishing Bridge got its name because there used to be so many people fishing from it. When I worked there in 1969, you had to roll your windows up as you drove across there to keep from getting a lure in your ear.
That's Bob Gresswell, research scientist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Bozeman, Montana. Bob has studied Yellowstone cutthroat trout in the park for over 40 years.
Well, there would be thousands of cutthroat trout at the mouth of Yellowstone Lake that could be observed during the peak of the migration.
Lots of fish everywhere. But then, in just one decade, everything changed. By 2005, cutthroat had practically disappeared from Yellowstone Lake. Biologists estimated that the Yellowstone cutthroat trout population plummeted from over 3 million fish to less than 300,000. Some big new factor had to be causing the decline. Again, Todd Kuhl.
I mean, for probably 10 to 15 years, we really saw very little recruitment of small cutthroat trout. Why? Because they were getting eaten by the lake trout. That's why.
And here was this big problem. Lake trout had invaded Yellowstone Lake. A native of the Great Lakes in Canada, lake trout had been introduced to some large bodies of water in the western U.S. as a sport fish early in the last century. But not Yellowstone Lake. Yellowstone Lake was a high mountain stronghold of the cutthroat until...
The first lake trout was first verified in 1994. We know some were probably introduced in the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s.
It was theorized that anglers had illegally dumped the lake trout into the lake, but the theory couldn't be verified. No matter how they got there, Kuhl says that the invasive lake trout were uniquely suited to have a huge impact on the native cutthroat.
Lake trout do great harm to cutthroat trout. Lake trout are predatory fish. First and foremost, essentially just big predatory fish-eating machines. They grow large, live 30, 40 or more years, grow 30, 40 or more pounds. They are highly prolific in the numbers of eggs that they can produce. And so they've got a lot of built-in mechanisms that give them sort of an advantage in Yellowstone Lake over and above the native cutthroat trout.
And the problem didn't stop with the drop in cutthroat. Over 40 species in the park depended on the native Yellowstone cutthroat for food, and they suddenly had far fewer cutthroat to eat. Before the lake trout showed up, enough bears fed on cutthroat in the streams around the lake that the park enforced bear closures to protect bears and visitors. But by 2005, very few bears were even seen in the closure areas. In the early 1990s, over 100 osprey nested around the lake. By 2000, there were roughly 6. And this highlights one of the biggest problems with invasive species. In any ecosystem, an invasive species can quickly upset the natural balance and affect many other species. As the cutthroat declined, the lake trout population exploded. And the new lake trout, they were just no replacement for the cutthroat. Behaving quite differently, they preferred deep water. They also didn't leave the lake to reproduce in the tributary streams, all of which made them inaccessible as a food source. It was an ecosystem at risk. Todd Kuhl drives the workboat out of the Bridge Bay Marina headed towards the southeast arm of the lake, over 15 miles away.
So we're lucky that
most of the boats are in the same general region of the lake today, so hopefully we won't have to travel too far and wide to see gill netting boats operating today out there. And then
The Park Service started controlling the lake trout population soon after they were found in 1994. Taking a page from commercial fishermen, fishery staff deployed gill netting boats to catch the invasive fish, an effort that still continues today. Currently, the park has somewhere between 30 and 40 miles of nets set in the lake to catch lake trout every day during the fishing season. Buoys mark the locations the nets are set, and then workboats haul the nets full of lake trout up. As the net comes in, the crews pick the fish from the net. They note their size, weight, and sex, and then they slit them open and dump them back in the lake. And here is the next big challenge with invasive species. Once installed, it often takes a ton of work to control them. They can also be nearly impossible to eradicate. In 2016, more than 350,000 lake trout were caught in the gill nets, the highest catch yet in a single year. And this is the main effort to save the cutthroat, the effort to catch the invading lake trout until their population crashes. But because of the massive amount of work that effort takes, biologists are also looking at new ways to knock down the lake trout population. In the fall, lake trout group up in large numbers, sometimes thousands of fish, to lay their eggs at specific locations, making both the lake trout and their eggs vulnerable. To find these sites, scientists have implanted radio telemetry tags in some lake trout. And by tracking the fish, they've identified over a dozen lake trout spawning areas in Yellowstone Lake.
And then we're doing research on methods to kill the lake trout eggs on these spawning sites.
To stop the lake trout at the start, one experimental technique involved shocking the eggs with electricity. Another attempted sucking the eggs up with a small suction mining dredge. But by far the most promising new method is surprisingly simple. Fisheries technician Mike Simientowski stands on the deck of a gill netting boat with a large lake trout in his hands.
Got all the lake trout that we just caught in the last couple gangs of net. And so right now we're over one of our dumping sites, and we're taking the lake trout and putting them through this fish grinder here, so that way we know that all the pieces of the fish are sinking all the way down to the bottom.
Grinding is used over some sites, while on others whole dead lake trout are being dumped. Laboratory tests show that the decomposing fish carcasses kill the eggs by eating all the oxygen in the water. Oxygen that the eggs need to survive. Again, Todd Cool.
And so we're moving forward pretty quickly with that method because it's so simple, because we're not taking anything foreign from the lake and bringing it in, like some kind of a chemical or something like that. We're just simply taking the dead fish that we're catching and putting them strategically on spawning areas.
And these big efforts to keep the ecosystem healthy, they seem to be paying off. Fewer small young lake trout and fewer big old lake trout are being caught in the nets.
And so that's telling us, even though our catches are still high each year, that's a strong signal that our suppression program is collapsing this population.
And as a result, the cutthroat are making a comeback.
For every lake trout we kill each summer, we're probably saving 40 to 50 or more cutthroat trout just in every given year.
More cutthroat of various sizes are being found in annual population monitoring. Anglers are catching more cutthroat. Visitors are returning to watch the cutthroat spawn in the late spring. Nesting osprey numbers are growing around Yellowstone Lake. And finally, bears are coming back to the spawning streams. Cool has even seen this firsthand.
I was on that spawning stream trying to collect a water sample in June with some of my crew, and that grizzly bear showed up. That was his stream, and those were his fish. And then watching him, get after the cutthroat trout and bring them up on the bank and chow them down, that's pretty amazing to see. And then, on top of that, the hundreds of people that were gathered to watch that as well, and that occurred for well over a month.
All encouraging signs. For the Park Service, whose mission is to preserve our natural resources unimpaired for future generations, the effort to repair the damage done by invasive lake trout is worth it. Yellowstone is one of the few remaining relatively intact ecosystems left in North America, and restoring the Yellowstone cutthroat, it helps it stay that way. For Yellowstone National Park, I'm Scott Christie.
This podcast is supported in part by Yellowstone Forever and the Eyes on Yellowstone program. Eyes on Yellowstone is made possible by Canon USA. This program represents the largest corporate donation for wildlife conservation in the park. This is Telemetry.
So it's not really a vocalization. It's not a call. What you heard is a Wilson snipe doing its territorial sound, but it's made with its wings and its tail. What male Wilson snipe do this time of the year, in the spring, they do this flight. These winnowing flights is what they're called. So each time they flap their wings, it pushes air through the stiff outer tail feathers, and it makes that woo, 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 woo kind of sound. They make that sound to establish their nesting territory and attract a female. It's a courtship sound. I've had people describe it to me in various ways. They sometimes think it's an owl. They're not sure what it is. Some people think it's a motor noise. It's a metallic sound. It's going on over your head, so it's really hard to pinpoint where the bird is. Plus, the bird's tiny. It's about the size of a robin. They're actually very delicately beautiful when you get to see them up close. It's a really neat bird. It's a bizarre little bird. It's eerie, it's strange, because it's often happening at dusk or at night, so it's coming out of the darkness. That's what's fascinating, is that it happens at a time that's sort of magical. I always think of dusk as magical, because almost anything can happen. Your imagination kind of goes wild. And when you hear sounds out of this, semi-darkness, they seem ethereal, otherworldly, wild, and they are. And it's neat. We use other senses. I love when we use more than just our eyes. I'm Katie Duffy. I'm the interpretive planner for Yellowstone National Park. I've been hooked on birds, obsessed with them for 40 years. I'm an addicted birder.
This is Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for listening.
They're howling at 7:32. One of the things I often think about when we hear wolves howling is, I'm sure you know the story, that it was the last of the original Yellowstone wolves were killed in 1926, about a half a mile from where we're standing. And so for any visitor that had come to Yellowstone from 1926 to 1995, when wolves were brought back and reintroduced and reestablished, I'm sure they had a great experience visiting the world's first national park, and they would have seen a lot of great stuff. But there's one thing that they missed out on. There would have been an unnatural silence here. But luckily we realized what a big mistake that was and figured out how to rectify it. So we're experiencing that right now. That silence is over.
I'm Rick McIntyre. I work for the Park Service in Yellowstone National Park, and my title is Biological Technician.
This is Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for listening.
I've been here 14 times since the mid-'80s, and since we started coming in the winter, we never have come in the summer again. We just love it in the winter.
It's magical. It's absolutely magical. Not many people, lots of things to do, wonderful skis, snowshoes, hikes.
I think it's so cool that the colors are different in the summer than in the winter. Like Morning Glory has much more color in the winter than it does in the summer, to me anyway.
And we had a treat yesterday as two very, very large coyotes walked right by our cabin window and cabin door. We wanted to invite them in for wine, but they seemed to be in a hurry.
It's a spirit, sort of, in the wintertime.
I'm Betsy Heiner, and I'm from Colorado Springs.
I'm Mary Smith from Colorado Springs.
I'm Sherry Kimball from Colorado Springs.
I'm Helen Michaels, and I'm from Port Washington, Wisconsin.
This is Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for listening.
We're going to take you down to listen to the lake sing. Come on down. Yeah, this doesn't happen all the time. It's fairly rare. So not many people hear this, because if there's any the tiniest bit of snow, the deal's off. The sound's all muffled. As this stuff freezes and tightens, there's movement underneath, so this crack will start, and the crack just takes off. Hear these things that'll sound just like an F-16 just coming right at you. When the sun comes up, it begins in earnest, and the sun goes down, peters out. The activity will subside and stop, get quiet. I've tried singing along, but it just doesn't work too well. Nothing beats that. I'm Bruce Sefton. I'm with the Maintenance Division of the National Park Service, here in the Lake District. Every day's fun.
This is Yellowstone National Park. Thanks for listening. For Yellowstone National Park and the Acoustic Atlas at Montana State University, this is telemetry. You know, every season in Yellowstone is pretty fantastic, but if you're into listening to the sounds of animals, spring and summer, well, there's just nothing like it. And while most creatures in Yellowstone are busily singing their hearts out this time of year, there's one animal that actually gets a little quieter in the spring and summer. And that's the wolf. You see, there's a seasonal cycle to wolf howling. Howling ramps up through the fall and it peaks in late winter. Then comes springtime.
Howling abruptly drops off, and this is caused by the female choosing a place to den that they really want to keep secret, if at all possible.
That's Kira Cassidy, research associate with the Yellowstone Wolf Project.
Choosing a den site is extremely important for a wolf pack. It's going to be their hub for the entire summer. It's the house of the entire next generation. And it has to be protected, of course, because the tiny, helpless pups are going to be there for several months. We've had cases where a pack has attacked another wolf's den and even killed the pups in some cases. They don't really want to let other packs know where they are and what they're doing. And in order to avoid that, they keep quiet.
Now, it's not only the frequency of howling that changes throughout the year, but the type of howling shifts too.
Wolves howl for a couple of different reasons. Some of that would be within the pack, so to keep track of each other, say if they've been separated.
And even though they're doing a lot less of it, this is the kind of howling that tends to dominate in the spring and summer, wolves communicating with their own pack mates.
They also howl to let other packs know where they are and to kind of establish a territory.
Wolves will often have these howling bouts with other packs. The two packs will howl back and forth as if to say, this is our turf, our territory. And it's that howling for territoriality that grows in the months leading up to the winter breeding season.
Howling really tracks the hormones. As the wolves are getting ready for the breeding season, testosterone will start to spike. Howling starts to increase. It's kind of a stressful time in some ways. They do a lot of howling during the breeding season. They also probably use howling as a way to advertise the number of wolves they have in the pack, the type of wolves they have in the pack. If they have a lot of big male fighters, that's going to come across in a howling bout with another pack. And in some ways, wolves may be able to use it to avoid a fight with another pack too. They can kind of create that space between each other, let each other know where they are, but also let them know who they are.
Kira's specialty is looking at territoriality in wolves and interpack aggression, basically when two packs come into contact with each other and fight. Sometimes wolves will fight until one pack or one animal displaces the other, and sometimes they'll fight to the death.
This running into other packs is so vastly important to a wolf pack. It's, of all the wolves that live in Yellowstone that we've radio collared, some of them disperse outside of Yellowstone, of course. But if they live their whole life in Yellowstone, 2/3 of them end up being killed by other wolves.
From Yellowstone National Park, this is What We Do. I'm Ashton Hooker.
And I'm Brett Rayburn.
Hey, Brett.
Hey, Ashton, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome.
Good.
It's getting close to lunch, so my stomach might rumble a little bit here. But
mine is seriously rumbling as well. I hope you can't hear it.
Yeah, I have this big lunchbox behind me. I'll try not to rummage in it too much. So we'll see.
Well, today we have Addie Falgout, who is a park guide here in Yellowstone. We're going to talk to her a little bit more about her job and what it's like. And so as a park guide, you know, if you're a visitor to Yellowstone, you might see them out and about either in the visitor center, roaming park trails, park guided walks and talks, things like that. And so along those same lines, we have the Junior Ranger program, and it's pretty popular.
Yes,
you
I've
can get
heard
it
of
in
it.
a bunch of different parks, Yellowstone as well. So my question for you, do you happen to know how many Junior Ranger badges are awarded here in Yellowstone every year?
Every year?
Every year.
Number of Junior Ranger badges. So not just people who like get the books and don't go through to graduate. I'm going to say, I'm trying to see if Miles will give me any hints here because he orders the badges. I think it's like, I'm going to say 160,000.
Ooh, wow, that's more than I thought you were going to guess.
But
really,
like
you're not too far off. So in the past couple of years, you know, we've had a few weird years with COVID and the flood and stuff. So it's been a little lower the past few years, but it's been about 50,000.
Okay. I'm like, come on, Junior Rangers, step up.
Yeah. But on
this year is going to be the year where we give out 160,000.
Like 50 to 100,000. So you're not too far off.
That is a lot of Junior Rangers being sworn in.
It's a lot more than I thought.
That's a lot of oath takers.
Yeah.
We're in good hands.
Yes, we are. All the Junior Rangers out there. So anyway, we're going to talk with Addie more about what she does in the park. So Addie, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Good. So ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how did you get your start with the National Park Service?
So I got my start in 2017 as an intern in Glacier Bay National Park.
And that's in Alaska.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It often gets mistaken for Glacier in Montana. So often I do specify Glacier Bay in Alaska.
I heard the emphasis on bay.
Yeah.
Cool. And so what drew you to that? Did you always know you wanted to be a park ranger?
So growing up, my family traveled to national parks. I think a lot of people in this career. And I kind of was really interested. I fell in love with the Tetons and I was like, well, I want to live there one day. And the way to live there is to become a park ranger. So simple enough. I'll just do that. And it got a little bit more complicated than that. But in high school and college, I started to look more seriously into pursuing a career in that direction. I actually visited Yellowstone in college and spoke to some rangers on that trip and asked them, hey, how do I get into this field if I'm interested? And they gave me some good information on internship programs like the SCA and also how to find jobs on USA Jobs.
What is the SCA, just for those who don't know?
Yeah, so the SCA is the Student Conservation Association, and the internship that I did in Glacier Bay was through them.
Okay, and so what exactly did you do?
Yeah, so the position there was an education intern, and Glacier Bay has pretty little visitors that actually set foot on the land there. And the number of visitors in the winter is pretty much non-existent. And so most of the visitation is in the summer on cruise ships. So in the winter, they have a pretty robust distance learning program. So we were actually using Zoom before COVID and before Zoom really became a thing, and essentially taking students on virtual whale watching tours and field trips to the park.
Wow.
That sounds like a good gig.
Yeah.
So you're on a boat like while you're doing this?
No. So we were in an office with a green screen.
That
made it look like we were on a boat. I did get to go out.
Shake the camera and rock it.
I did get to go out with the oceanography team though, which was really fun one day, and we got to take water samples. So I did get to have that experience in the bay, but most of the time was spent in the office.
Okay. So did you go from Glacier Bay and then Yellowstone, or were there other stops in between?
There were a few steps in between. Yeah, so after Glacier Bay, I did a couple of seasonal positions as an interpretive park ranger and also an education position in Grand Teton National Park. And then I was pretty fortunate to get offered a permanent job pretty early on in my career, and that was in Hot Springs, Arkansas. That was also a park guide position. I was there for a few months and then took a lateral reassignment to a park guide position here, and I've been here since. It's been about 4.5 years, I think.
Okay, wow. And so tell us a little bit about being in Yellowstone. A lot of people don't know that there are actually park rangers that live on the interior of the park. So what that means is not at any of the park entrances. And so Yellowstone closes down in the winter. So you're at Lake Village, down by Yellowstone Lake. So tell us what that is like. Like, how did you even get here this morning? Walk us through what that is like.
Yeah, so essentially we kind of get snowed in the winter, and often things are complicated, but there's a lot of snowmobiling to your car and then transitioning to take your car to a location. Currently, we have less snow this year, which you think would make traveling easier, but it's actually made things more complicated because my car is at one location, but there's not enough snow for me to snowmobile from the roads that have enough snow on them to my car. So I have to take like an in-between car to get to my car. So to get to this studio this morning, I took a snowmobile and a couple of vehicles.
Wow.
And it took about 2 hours, whereas normally if I could just snowmobile straight here, it would have been probably 30 minutes faster than that. So
wow.
That is dedication to
complicated
the show.
Steps.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, but those of us in the interior look for excuses to get out. So I was very happy to be out here today.
Wow. Well, we're glad you're joining us, and you took the long trek to come all the way up here.
What's your typical, like, how often do you get out to get groceries and things like that?
So it really varies depending on the year. Typically, I try to stockpile groceries in the fall so that I never need to go out specifically for a grocery trip. But if I happen to be out for another reason, then I always get groceries. But I'd say usually in a normal year, I'd probably leave twice a month each winter. So every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
So I've seen some park rangers who live on the interior in winter. They do a lot of canning.
Mm-hmm.
Are you into that?
No, I am the unhealthy ranger that lives off of pasta
Ramen.
and frozen pizza. Yeah.
I
So,
guess.
hey, yeah.
It's delicious.
I don't do any canning, but if you just eat a lot of pasta, dried goods, that stays really well. So I can really stock up in the fall.
Wow. And so in a typical winter, so one that we're not having now with not as much snow, you would normally just snowmobile everywhere,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
just snowmobile to my vehicle at whatever entrance it's located at. And typically it's not a big deal. I actually really enjoy snowmobiling most of the time. And there's incredible opportunities to see wildlife along the way. Amazing scenery. The sunrises and sunsets in the winter are always really special. So although it has its challenges, overall, I really like living at Lake. There's incredible opportunities for skiing around the neighborhood. But it's not to say it doesn't come without its challenges.
For sure. So in your current position as park guide, do you have a typical day? Can you tell us a little bit what that's like? I know it probably varies from day to day, but
yeah, I'd say I have a typical summer day and a typical winter day.
Okay.
Would you like to know about both of those or just
Sure,
one of
yeah.
the seasons? Okay. So in the summer, a typical day, a third of it is usually spent working the visitor center front desk, answering questions, helping people plan their trips, answering questions about what birds they're seeing, animals they're seeing. Like the number of questions we get, you never know what's going to come out of someone's mouth. So it can be all over the place. Another third of the day is typically spent leading a ranger guided program. So that can be a talk, a campfire program, a walk. And the remaining third of the day is typically spent out in the field roving. And so talking to visitors on boardwalks in some of the thermal areas, interacting with people at wildlife jams, making sure no one's petting bison at wildlife jams.
Very important.
Yeah. So that's kind of a typical summer day. In the winter, my job is kind of unique in that I staff a building called a warming hut. And so, most people are kind of putting out figurative fires in their day-to-day work. And my job is literally to go and start a fire. So I go to the warming hut, start a fire. And the purpose of that is to serve as a place for snowmobile groups to stop in and warm up. That's the sole source of heat for the building. So depending on the day, if it's really cold out, it could be 10 degrees inside when I get there. It could take a few hours to get up to temperature, but we try to get it about 60 degrees in the building and interact with groups as they stop by throughout the day. The Fishing Bridge Warming Hut is a quieter location. So on average, we've got about 20 to 40 people that stop per day. And in between groups, surprisingly, cell service is actually really good at that location. So I'm able to plug into a mobile hotspot and respond to visitor trip planning emails. I've helped with social media at times as well. And so I can stay connected and do other work in between groups. So it's more kind of office and admin work mixed in with splitting firewood.
Wow.
That's a good combination.
Quite a variety of skills required. And so where do you live? Like, what are your living accommodations like? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering.
That's the number one question I get asked at the warming hut. And what I usually tell those visitors that are asking is that we have housing at each of the developed locations in the park. So my housing area is only a couple miles away. So it's just a couple miles snowmobile ride to the warming hut. Often groups get there and they're like, how did you get here? And I'm like, well, I snowmobiled here just like you. But like, I had the easy commute. Like they're snowmobiling 26 miles to get to me. I only did 2. So
You're like, I just crawled out of the lake.
Out of the lake. Which you probably could because it's not frozen.
Yeah, I did a training once in the park where I spent the night in a snow trench. And sometimes I do consider telling people that. I'm like, where do you live? Where do you sleep at night? I'm like, just in a trench in the snow over there.
I've been here a few years, so they moved me to the 3-bedroom snow trench. Yeah. They take care of us here.
So what's the most important skill you'd say for your
I'd say
job?
the most important skill in my position is probably communication. So as an interpretive position, it's really important to communicate these messages and try to foster a connection between the the people that are visiting Yellowstone and the resources that we have here in the park. And so being able to tailor messages for specific audiences is really important in order to communicate that effectively and try to hopefully inspire the next generation of stewards for these lands.
Yeah.
What's one of the like hardest or most memorable questions that you've had asked?
Ooh, that's a good one. So this is a funny one, but the most memorable question, there was a girl, she was probably about 12 years old and she was really shy. I was at Mud Volcano and I could tell she was kind of embarrassed to ask this question. Her mom's like, she has a question. And I was like, sure. And she's like, I don't know if I want to ask. And I was like, no, like go for it. No judgment. And her question was, how do bison poop in such perfect circles? And I loved it because so often we get the same questions.
That's a scientist question,
over
right?
and over again. And so that I'd never gotten that one before and I've never gotten that one since. And so, you know, I took a moment and I was like, well, it has to do with the consistency in which the poop comes out. So it's kind of like pancake batter. Like if you put pancake batter in a frying pan, it like spreads out into a circle. I'm like, it doesn't come out that shape. And I think that helped her out. So I wonder if she thinks about that.
I'm not eating any pancakes that you bring to the office, but that's a great way of explaining it.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that every time I see some bison poop out there.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite part of the job?
My favorite part of the job is probably getting to re-experience the magic of Yellowstone through the eyes of first-time visitors. I've literally had kids jumping up and down for joy when they saw a grizzly bear for the first time.
Oh.
And I've seen adults like cower when they hear a bison grunt during the rut. And those moments just remind me of like how special this place is. They allow me to remember why I fell in love with this place and why it's worth protecting.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so on the other side of the coin of that, you know, there's great parts of the job, maybe some that are not so great or just a little tough. What's like the toughest part of your job, you'd say?
I think the toughest part of my job is probably dealing with angry and frustrated visitors. You know, people are coming here on vacation and everything's supposed to go right for them. And when it doesn't go right and they're on vacation, they really want someone to blame and someone to give them answers for that. And being a frontline staff member, we're kind of the face for the park. So we're often the person that receives the brunt of that anger and aggression. And especially in the middle of the summer, if you're receiving that day after day, multiple times a day, and often these complaints are about things that we have little to no control over. Sometimes they're because of natural disasters like floods. It can be really hard to deal with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes lots of patience.
Yes. Yes. Lots of patience. So